Blank Check, the most explosive podcast ever made.
Wait, that's what you did?
Okay, so here's the thing.
Is that the tagline or something?
I was digging through all the trailers and the posters last night, and there was one I was trying to find that I can't quite locate. Okay. But all of the trailers kept using these taglines that are like the most explosive comedy spectacular in history.
I just know a comedy spectacular.
This is the thing.
That's the tagline I know from the
one
big
of the
poster.
advertising materials I saw combined the two, because a lot of the trailers kept on saying the most explosive movie ever made, and the posters keep saying a comedy spectacular, and one of them combined it, and it speaks to the inherent issues with this movie. Okay. That their selling of it was, this is so funny and so big.
I mean, that's the movie at large, but okay.
But that they were just saying that as a statement and being like, don't you want to see a movie that's really loud and expensive and has jokes in it? And you're like, what's it about? And they're like, don't worry about that.
Uh-huh.
It's the most movie.
Yes. What about this one? Soon the screen will be bombarded by the most explosive barrage of, and it looks like the word shit in Japanese.
Correct.
Ever filmed.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just like, right, like most screen filled. Like
yes.
There won't be a dull second.
No, and this is one of those classic cases of most equaling best.
Yes, exactly. That's the story of 1941, Griffin.
Yes, it's the most movie ever made, and we all agree that it's probably the great American film.
He took 10 minutes to do this. Yes, please.
It's all excess. It's spectacle. Yes. Like it at least delivers on spectacle. But my question for you is, did you consciously avoid a quote from the movie because you couldn't find a line of dialogue that didn't have an Asian slur?
Nick, there was a quote on the IMDb page I was close to, and then I realized it had an African-American slur in it.
Oh, there you go.
Very good.
I think there are very few quotes from this movie. There are very few distinctive lines that don't have something.
I don't think there are really a lot of distinctive lines, period. And that's why I was like,
I didn't say memorable, I said distinctive.
I was just like, what are you even looking for? I don't really know what the like killer line from 1941 is.
I was looking for this one statement, but it speaks to how this movie had like 6 similar taglines that were used in alternation, all of which are just trying to get the same point across, which was big and funny. Expensive.
There's the Aykroyd monologue, but there's nothing in that really like I can even remember specifically. You know, like when he's up on the tank and he's trying to calm everyone down during the Zoot Suit riot.
Well, I can barely understand what he's saying during that.
This like screaming at the top of his lungs.
Just his weird, like, fast autistic computer speak, right? It's like the most extreme version of, I'm Dan Aykroyd, you're in a tank, I'm shooting at you.
Everyone
is acting used car salesman shit.
Yeah, every line has the intensity of Christopher Lloyd in the Addams Family. Just like everyone is just shouting everything.
Here's a fun question I thought of while watching this film last night. If you were talking to someone who had seen this, but had no frame of reference for Dan Aykroyd as a person, how would you describe to them who Dan Aykroyd plays in this movie? He is first billed. I know it's because of alphabetical, but his face is big on the poster. He's one of the people the movie was sold on. He's a huge fucking star at this moment.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think you could explain to someone what his character does in this movie in a way that really clarifies who he was amidst the 80 characters.
It's hard to even know his function in the plot, like exactly. Like
the closest you could say is like there's a 10-minute stretch where he's like concussed and is doing weird shit, but you're like, that could describe almost any character in this movie during any 10-minute stretch.
He's kind of a voice of reason, sort of at moments amongst the various people who are going crazy. Right? Like,
yes, but that's also, once again, you're describing...
This is a terrible challenge. I hate the challenge.
I just think it's fascinating that this movie is like, we got Aykroyd. And you're like, how are you applying him? And they're like, we don't really know.
My first note was not enough slurs. So I didn't realize. You guys are right. Now in hindsight, those were really bad.
You gave it 1 star on Letterboxd, but only for that reason. You lack of commitment.
1 star per 100 slurs.
It topped out there. Hi, this is Blank Check with Griffin and David, the most explosive comedy podcast ever made. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
You look very worried.
This movie really bummed me out is too strong, but I was just kind of like, I have never seen it in full.
Yeah, same.
And I really just had that thought of like, it's gonna be like interesting.
We all think that. Everyone thinks this.
And like there'll be like kind of, you know, a lot to excavate about. And there is to some extent, like, but it's just, I was just kind of flabbergasted by how boring it was.
Do you mind
I'm
reciting the thing you texted us yesterday while you were watching
let
it?
me find it.
Yeah. This is a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their career, such as making Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Sure.
And are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion products they want, such as 1941.
Sure.
I mean, a perfect example of like 2 mega successes followed by a no-notes disaster.
Have you ever had someone who's been so they're so sure that they were making a disaster because this was like they're gonna hate this. This is gonna bomb.
That's a good point. It's a bounce that he sees coming while he's making it, I think. Yes.
But what's also weird about it is we've maybe covered things that are like bounces that people see coming, but it's bounces where they're like, look, there's some esoteric, uncommercial thing I've always wanted to do.
I'll do
and I
this
have
with
the
my
cachet
cred.
to do it, and I'm leveraging it to get this out of my system. But this is like him making something ostensibly in the trappings of what should be a popcorn movie and just doing it incorrectly and knowing he's fucking it up. I watched this, there's an 1 and 40-minute documentary on the Blu-ray, which has been carried over from the Laserdisc. This thing has been ported over for like 25 years onto various editions, and it's mostly talking heads of just like Spielberg, Zemeckis, John Milius, Bob Gale. And he says my operating principle on this movie was anything goes. And he was like, I don't want anyone explain to me that it's a bad idea. We can do anything we want, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, this feels like a guy who actually wants to like fuck up on purpose because he's feeling the burden of being seen as a golden child.
He's like running headlong into the wall, being like, what happens if I hit my head against the wall? Like,
right. And he's like, either it works and I'm literally unstoppable, or I'm grounded in a way I maybe need at this moment. This is a miniseries on the films of Steven Spielberg. It's called Podrastic Cast. Today we are talking about his first bounce, 1941. A World War II movie.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
Sadly, because our guest today would be very, very well suited to talk about a World War I movie.
Go on.
Well, they host the Doughboys podcast.
Oh, wow.
We're one war off.
We were both scratching our heads.
You guys are like, which one's that? No, yeah, of course, the Doughboys were the names of the soldiers.
Yeah.
The American soldiers.
Right. And in World War II, they were called the Action Boys with a Z, right? We should have got Gabers and Rogers and Stanger on.
The British soldiers were called Tommy.
Okay.
That was like how British soldiers were referred to, like the sort of...
Interesting.
In World War I, the classic British soldier was called Tommy.
What were American...
Doughboys. That's what it was.
No, I'm saying before World War II.
I don't know. G.I. Joe? I don't know.
Google type away. Nick Wiger and Mike Mitchell.
Hi. Hey, buddy. Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Can I say one thing to your listenership? First off, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. Mitch and I are both big fans of the podcast.
God bless you.
We're always happy to guest on. Always honored to guest on the show. This is the first time. I feel like every time we've guested on Blank Check in the past, and I think this is the case with how you tend to schedule your show. We've been like 18 months in advance of when the miniseries comes out.
Oh yeah,
it's like
that's true. Now we're close.
Exactly. Yeah. I was listening to the Duel episode on the commute to the studio, so it's like we're almost caught up to the present with this Spielberg series.
Isn't this also kind of the first time you guys have not been on a movie that's like a really sort of big, kind of weighty
three previous
movie?
movies you guys have covered.
Right.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, They Live, and Seven.
Yeah.
Right. Like really good movies.
They are all at least in conversation for that director's masterpiece. If not the undisputed one, they're at least in that talk. And this is, you're getting what is, like, I don't want to say inarguably, but pretty widely considered his single worst film. You'll find very few people who put something lower.
At the bottom.
Right.
It's like, I mean, you know, it's like how George W. Bush is a bottom 5 president, right?
Well,
you know how people do rankings of presidents? These historians are always like ranking presidents.
Yeah.
I always think it's really weird.
My well was sarcastic. I want to state that because no one laughed.
You don't like George W. Bush. Sure, fine.
I don't like him. I love him. No, what I was going to say is...
Dogface.
They were called the Dog Faces?
Yeah, Dog Face was a nickname for U.S. Army soldiers, especially enlisted infantrymen in World War II.
Wow.
Kind of insulting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This does seem insulting.
To use my current
first
favorite.
wife served.
First wife.
To use my recent favorite word on the podcast, I do feel like this is kind of like inarguably Spielberg's greatest folly, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is like the biggest swing and a miss and the sort of public fallout kind of like humbling moment.
It is a big swing. I mean, that's the thing. He's trying stuff. And yes, and my tepid defense of this movie, which I have seen before. Mitch, I don't know, had you ever seen this before?
No, I've never seen it. This is my first time I've ever seen it.
I watched this movie as a child. I saw this when I was in elementary school, and it along with another Aykroyd movie, Dragnet. I don't know if y'all remember the Dragnet remake.
City of
that
Crime.
was a comedy, yeah. That was like one of the first times I saw a comedy with someone I thought was funny, where I was like, why is this not funny? Like I was like, I had like a 9-year-old brain of like not understanding how someone who was funny was capable of being unfunny.
This is why I'm so happy you guys are on for this episode. Because I mean, as you said,
because we're experts on unfunny.
Why are these comedians not making me laugh? It's so weird.
The Stanley Kubrick
Apple
take.
tagged this as a comedy podcast.
The Stanley Kubrick take is I agree with maybe. Kubrick thinks it's a great movie, but just is not funny at all.
Yeah,
right. You should have released it and sold it as a drama.
And which I'm sure y'all have some of this in the dossier, but I was shocked to find that this was originally developed as a drama. But like the thing I picked up on I watched it twice for this episode, and the thing I picked up
a theatrical cut both times.
Yeah, I just watched the theatrical cut twice.
Okay.
When I was realizing this, I've maybe saw the extended cut because I watched it on TV as a kid. Maybe that's the version I saw.
Extended cut was the one that was
TV
largely
mainstay,
right?
Yes.
And then was on home video for a while. Now it's optional. Yeah.
Yeah. So watch it. But like the thing I picked up on, speaking of Kubrick, that I didn't pick up on as a kid, not knowing who Slim Pickens was. Once Slim Pickens showed up, I was like, oh, he's trying to make Dr. Strangelove. Like this is an attempt at that sort of that level of war satire. And
which, by the way, Slim Pickens plays he's a doughboy. He's a former doughboy.
That's right. He is a former doughboy.
He served.
This is true.
Right. And he does give Wendy's 4 forks in the movie.
Even though I think Soletis has gotten bad.
Right. Even though and the app isn't as good anymore.
There's that scene where he keeps saying, "Cigarettes are back." I don't know why my Slim Pickens impression is goofy.
It was fine.
No, this is a perfect movie where you're like, why is none of this funny? And you're watching
100%.
it and you're like, there isn't like a clear, like, well, this is obviously conceptually doomed unfunny, but just every moment there's like a black hole of comedy.
I'm just kind of like, why am I not laughing? Like,
right.
This is
why
funny.
Am I not
this
laughing?
Is a vaudevillian, big, silly, slapsticky stuff. Why am I kind of like, is it too good in a way? Like,
These
is
are all the
Spielberg
questions.
too good at staging action? And so I'm actually kind of just like watching what happens, and it's not quite, goofy enough. I don't know. Goofy things happen. Yeah.
I have a couple takes, but the reason we're recording this closer to the date was we were trying very hard to make this an in-person record, you guys being on the East Coast, and then it didn't quite work out. And there was a question of like, you guys are going to be doing a live show here in a couple months. Should we wait and reschedule you for something later? And I was like, maybe we do something later as well. But you guys on 1941 really feels right. And watching it last night, I was like, there is a larger conversation to be had here without getting academic. A dumb version of this conversation where watching this movie genuinely makes me step back and go like, what is funny?
Yeah, right. How does something become funny?
Why is anything funny? Because it's really weird to watch incredibly funny people in circumstances where you're like, I could see this being funny, and things like that are not ineptly crafted, and are certainly given all the resources and support they need. And there's like anti-laughs without it feeling like anti-humor, without it feeling like disastrous failed humor. It's just not fucking funny.
Yeah, it's like John Belushi in a fighter jet cracking a Coke bottle in half and then gargling with it and then throwing it out throwing it to the ground. Like that could be funny. Like that could be a bit of physical comedy. You're watching this like, okay, all the pieces are here, but you're watching it, it just feels abrasive or like nothing at all.
I watched the extended cut, which is 2.5 hours long.
Oh God.
I had a notes app that was write down every time
you laugh.
You audibly make a sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I had 5 full laughs.
4 farts?
A lot of farts. Farts were their own note. I think I had 5 like, huh. And like 2 like, huh. Kind of half chuckles.
Not bad, honestly.
Yeah.
It was a little higher than I was expecting.
Yeah.
I will say they basically ended by the 1 hour mark. Like at a certain point, the movie just wore me out. I think there were none in the last hour, possibly. But the Belushi Coke bottle is one that got me. I will say, anytime Belushi is on screen, it at least resembles
there's
comedy.
Energy.
Yeah,
It is comedy adjacent. You're like, I'm not laughing, but I get this is comedy.
Yeah.
Whereas other scenes, you're like, I don't even know what I'm seeing anymore.
But wait, I do want to hear, what you, so, okay, Nick, you'd already seen 1941.
Yes.
You had some memory of it. What did you guys, and Mitch, you'd never seen, what did you guys think of 1941? Just broadest reaction.
I think it's good that what Griffin was saying with the Doughboys are good guests to have on for this. I can tell you why I think it doesn't work as a comedy. So you were afraid of me wagging my finger there?
Yeah,
Sorry.
You're getting riled up.
I am getting riled up
Well,
here.
because he's about to say it's too woke.
Yeah.
No.
I'm about to give a little Aykroyd type speech right here.
Hell yeah.
Unga Pachka. Wags, there's too much.
Yes.
There's too much. There's too much going on at once. I wrote down Steven Spielberg. That's what I said because
Mitch
Steven Spielberg. He's going nuts. There's a million. It's a sort of thing with comedy where you're like, oh, you got to let things breathe a little bit. And no joke. There's almost not a single joke that gets to kind of breathe in the movie. It's all so delivered so fast. And then also at the same time, people are falling over or yelling other lines at the same time. It's like such an insane, like maybe it's a mad world or something. He was trying to like evoke that or something, but it's just too much stuff.
It's the unrelenting cacophony of like the Waterworld stunt show at Universal. You know what I mean? It just like kind of like things are just keep happening.
Yeah.
And you can take that for 20 minutes, but if you take it for 2 full hours, it just you get numb to it. It's like every single scene has a car exploding or someone getting punched in the face or
people getting knocked over by cars.
People getting knocked over by cars, a building collapsing. There's like Robert Stack just giving exposition outside the movie theater at a certain point. In the background, a Jeep just flips randomly, and it's just hard to like track what's happening.
By the way, one of the funniest moments for me is him just going and enjoying Dumbo. That's like
which is a quieter moment.
Yes,
yeah.
The best moment in the movie is when anytime Dumbo is playing and I'm watching Dumbo, locked the fucking Dumbo.
You're like,
being
what a
like,
good
God,
movie."
Dumbo is so good.
Yeah.
Thinking about like, should I show my daughter Dumbo? And then being like, wow, Dumbo is really sad. Like it really is upsetting, like the mom. And I'm like having all these thoughts about Dumbo. The movie is, by the way, now like being like moving on from Dumbo. And I'm like, still thinking about Dumbo.
My friend Alejandro used to have a stand-up bit about the reason why Atlas Shrugged is so long is in the middle of the book. The main character reads another book. And he's like, in Great Expectations, just you read the full Great Expectations, and then on page 500 it goes, and she closed the book and said, wow, what a good book. And it's like that with Dumbo, where you're like, Dumbo is like famously 50 minutes
it's very
long.
short,
right?
Very short, yeah.
Watching the extended cut of the movie, I'm like, you could have just given me Dumbo in full.
Yeah, just have people
and
be
I
like,
would have been
let's sit
happier.
down.
Yeah.
Look, Steven Spielberg, this is what I want to throw to you guys. I'm sort of realizing as I look at my Spielberg rankings.
Okay.
I think the worst 5 movies he's made are his comedies.
Tilt this over. I'm
like,
inclined to say you're right.
Things like, like the Indiana Jones movies are fun adventure movies. They have comic tones. Like, so same with Tintin. Sugarland Express is like sort of a comedy, kind of like comedy drama, caper, right? Catch Me If You Can is a comedy, but it's again like a caper movie. It's very melancholy.
I was gonna say, Sugarland and Catch Me If You Can operate on a similar register of being kind of like dramedy.
Yeah, I'm keeping those like
with a chase structure
to me,
versus straight comedy.
His worst films are 1941, The
Correct.
Terminal, Hook, Always, and I'm sorry, the BFG.
No, I agree.
And like, I mean, the BFG is a kid's movie, but it is, sort of a
Sucks and is for losers.
Right. 1941, The Terminal, and Hook.
Yes.
But especially 1941, and his two worst movies are his two like straightest attempts at a comedy.
But I feel like you hear people say this a lot.
And maybe
especially in discussing 1941. No, but I think I have the same 5 as you in maybe a slightly different order. When people discuss like Spielberg, they're like, and of course his Achilles heel is he can't do comedy. And when this came out at the time, people were almost celebrating like, thank God, this guy isn't invincible. He's got a weakness. He can't do comedy. What's weird about it is I think Spielberg is incredibly good at putting comedy into non-comedic movies.
100%.
Yes. He can have such a light touch.
And it's part of his magic is his balance is like even in something like Saving Private Ryan, which is like so relentless, it could be so dire. He'll have stuff like Jeremy Davies doing like physical comedy.
Yeah, that's
where you're like,
funny.
He's really good at the instincts of like, when do you like take your foot off the gas a little, have a little reprieve, something that doesn't feel flippant to the rest of the tone. All the Indiana Jones movies are funnier than this movie.
Without
ostensibly being comedies.
Jurassic Park is funnier than this movie.
Absolutely.
Both Jurassic Parks he directed. Yeah.
Right. But it's like when he's like, you know what I want to do? I want to just simplify and just do a straight comedy. He like falls apart.
Yeah, he seems to be searching for whatever, a superstructure he can't have. This movie also, I mean, this movie's real problem is, what is this movie about?
Well, this is the thing to talk about.
Because I know what the movie is about. It's about a genuine historical event that they're having fun with and supersizing. But what the fuck is this movie about? Like, what am I supposed to walk out thinking?
Exactly.
I truly don't really know.
There were 2 really interesting things I found out in this special feature documentary, right? And like, I think at the beginning of it, Spielberg says like, they liked it in Europe. And he's like, so I go to Europe when I want to feel better about 1941. But he was like, basically, it felt like we made this movie that only like me, Milius, and the 2 Bobs enjoyed.
Right.
Like he's sort of like, none of us have any shame. We had such a good time making this, and it felt like our big fuck you to everything and everyone, and we just had uninhibited fun, right? But the 2 things they said that stuck out to me. One is they're talking about the development of this project, which, as you said, Wiger, started out as a drama and then at some point transformed into a comedy. And they're talking about how the 2 Bobs, Zemeckis and Gale, discovered this real incident that they morphed and combined with a couple other things. The idea of there being a Japanese attack on California. And they're talking about like that felt like a great starting point for a movie. And then Bob Gale goes, I mean, in real life, the event happened in 1942. And I'm like, wait a second. So right off the bat, why the fuck is this movie called 1941?
That's a fair point. It's a good point. I mean, the Battle of Los Angeles did take place in 1942.
That is not the big problem, but it feels emblematic of like, you can't even explain to me why you're doing this. Why is the title of a movie a different year than when the thing happened? Why are we changing things willy-nilly? The other thing was he talked about how the Robert Stack character, he originally offered to John Wayne. That was his wildest dream.
This is what I know. Yeah,
was
sure.
to get John Wayne to do the film.
Right.
And he had like developed a friendship with John Wayne.
They get the script to John Wayne, and John Wayne is like, you shouldn't make fun of this.
The way Spielberg put it,
sure,
he was like, I'm on the phone with John Wayne. John Wayne pitched me a project he wanted to do. I was like, I actually have a script. Would you mind reading it? He's like, absolutely, send it over. And he's like, John Wayne, like, called me within 2 hours of the messenger dropping the script off. He clearly had read it immediately and was irate.
He was really mad
and was like, "How fucking dare you? American soldiers said, fought and died for this war."
I thought you were an American.
Correct.
I thought you were going to make a movie to honor World War II. This dishonors the memory of what happened. Don't even make this film. I'll be very disappointed if you wind up making this picture.
And the way Spielberg
did he at least call him Pilgrim at the end?
And then he threw out some racial slurs. The way Spielberg put it, he was like, John Wayne was like, this script is a slap in the face to the U.S. military. And Spielberg's retort was, I don't think it's a slap in the face. I think it's a pie in the face. I have respect for the U.S. military. I just think it's fun to put pie in faces.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's the whole problem right there. This movie has no fucking point of view.
It doesn't really have
John
a perspective.
Wayne's like, this is offensive because it's not taking the military seriously. And Spielberg's like, I have nothing critical to say about the military. I just think it's funny when pies go in people's faces.
But like,
Right. It's going back to, the kind of attempt at making, a Dr. Strangelove. It's like Dr. Strangelove has a point of view. Like, you understand what it's saying about, like, Cold War hysteria. This one, I have no idea what it's trying to convey.
Or
Dr. Strangelove
like
is
MASH.
Dr. Strangelove is anti-war. MASH is anti-war.
Yes.
These are movies with, like, 1941. I kind of agree with John Wayne. Like, I'm like,
I agree with him on a lot of things, damn it.
On a lot of things.
Mostly his Playboy interviews.
Where I'm kind of like, well, and I guess that we can talk about how it turned from a drama to a comedy, because it's like, that what it's about is like a paranoid, on-edge nation after Pearl Harbor, kind of like, exploding into suspicion and chaos and all that. And the movie's like, I guess is kind of like, these dorks. And I'm like, they're not dorks. Yeah. They're freaking out and it's causing problems. Like,
but that's even
it's scary.
Something like The Russians Are Coming,
Right,
which is another movie that feels like a big influence on this.
That to me is the most obvious analog. And that's a movie about paranoia that is funny. The Russians Are Coming is funny. Yeah.
And it's also like that movie functions more as social satire, where it's about like the American public reacting to something rather than like a scathing indictment of the military.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a take too.
Yeah.
And instead this movie is just kind of like, everyone's dumb.
No, to me, this movie is like, we have lots of money.
Yes.
Also. But anyway, Nick, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, and Mitch, I want to hear what you have to say as well. But like, I was just going to say that it's 1941 is the movie, right? It's set before like the kind of the outbreak of the full-fledged American involvement in the European and Pacific theaters. Mm-hmm. But like for this to work as satire, World War II would have had to be a big nothing, right? Because it would have been like look at all this hysteria, these people getting worked up over this thing that was like this, whatever that was a false alarm. But it completely. I kind of sympathize with John Wayne's perspective. By the way, how much John Wayne have felt like towards the end of his career, towards the end of his life. Spielberg makes Close Encounters and Jaws. He hears Spielberg is making a World War II movie and he wants him. And he gets the script delivered, reads it immediately. And then like on page 5, a lady's trying to fuck an airplane. Like,
hey, John. I mean, I think John Wayne, who is a fascinating figure, had he had this whole complex about
fascinating political figure.
Well, how he didn't serve, right?
Yes,
and he played all these servicemen in movies and stuff like that. And he, I think, had a weird chip on his shoulder about being a phony actor instead of a real hero.
On his shoulder was like he had like imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And the whole thing with John Wayne is I grew up just thinking that he was this like super square, right? Like that was what I knew about him. Then you start watching John Wayne movies and you're like, this guy really pops. This guy fucking rocks. The screen eats this guy up. He's so good.
He's one of the definitive, I don't know if he's a good actor, but he's an unbelievable movie star guys.
Right. I just want to watch this guy like pour beers. Like this rules. But like the Zoot Suit riots, which are part of this movie.
Big part. And by the way, the extended cut, I was like trying to look up what the differences are. It feels like it's 90% that plot line put back in.
That's like
which is the main thread of the version I watched.
That's like a really interesting, charged, scary part of history where like white soldiers started beating up black people and Mexicans and stuff in like the middle of the war, and like patriotism is curdling. Again, and Spielberg's like, well, it's like a big set piece where like a bunch of punching happens. Like, this is great.
When I say that his take on the movie is everyone is dumb, I don't mean that in a pointed way where he's like trying to comment on like human fallibility or whatever. It's just like going against the adage, like the comedy adage of like play to the top of your intelligence. Yes. Like it's very hard to make audiences find dumb people funny, especially at like played at length. This is a movie where everyone is just low intelligence in a way that doesn't feel like it's commentary on anything.
That was exactly like another reason why the movie isn't funny. It's just a comedy of misunderstandings where you're like, oh, they shoot John Belushi shoots Treat Williams' plane. You know what I mean? It's like, and then the Japanese submarine is out at sea, lost for most of the movie. Right. It's like and I get that it's not a real threat and that they're just paranoid, but you're just like, the comedies of misunderstanding is bad. It's it's boring. There's no stakes.
Mitch, it's boring. That's exactly what it is.
Boring ass movie.
Because you get it right away what the joke is, and then there's not really. There's submarine
You're so
still
much
lost.
smarter than the characters, and to your point, point, like page 5, minute 5 or whatever, you're like, okay, Nancy Allen really wants to fuck airplanes. Where's this going? It goes just there across 10 more scenes. Yeah. She just keeps wanting to fuck airplanes.
She's
it doesn't
horny about
really
airplanes.
heighten.
I was
no,
excited
like,
when Slim Pickens found the in the Cracker Jack box when the Japanese found the compass. I was like, thank God they're gonna go to like Hollywood now. And then Slim Pickens swallows it, and I was like, fuck, this sucks. Like I want them to go. I want something to happen here. That's why I liked the Zoot Suit stuff, just because I at that point I was like, this is fun to watch. You know what I mean?
It's fun to watch. Yeah, he's a good director. Like that's what the Zoot Suit Rides thing. I'm not mad about it in sort of I can't believe he didn't remark on the seriousness. I'm kind of like, well, there is something to that, but the movie is not interested in whatever there is to that.
It's not saying anything in its depiction. I mean, it obviously completely sucks out, it removes the racial element from the historical thing. But like it also is like it's depicting it, but not saying anything. But this goes back to a thing I started to say earlier of like my tepid defense of this movie is. You watch that sequence and it begins in the dance hall, and that whole bit, that big dance contest sequence that turns into a fight. It's like, that's pretty dazzling to watch. Yeah. It's an impressive bit of staging. And to contrast it with another one, 1941 versus Red One, like two like action comedies that absolutely do not that do not work. Red One is just like a muddy.
That made me mad to compare. I actually do. I think I like the movie way more.
Yeah, because Red One is like a muddy, ugly mess. There's nothing to look at in that $250 million CG goop fest that's at all like appealing visually. And this movie at least has stuff where it's like, oh, okay, he's doing stuff.
I got a pitch.
Yeah.
1940 Red One.
Yeah, there we go.
We pitched that to The Rock. It's a period piece with Callum Drift.
That's great.
Right. To your John Wayne point, Wags, like a thing I kept thinking about in that whole anecdote, Mitch, you killed it. Bezos is fucking blowing your phone up right now. John Wayne, similarly, in this period of time, a couple years earlier, was Mel Brooks's first choice for the Waco Kid in Blazing Saddles.
Wow. Sure. I mean, John Wayne died the year this movie came out. He was also like,
this is the
near
very
the end of his life. He obviously suffered from cancer at the end of his life. Yes.
Sends him the Blazing Saddles script. Mm-hmm. John Wayne reads it, calls Mel Brooks back immediately, is like, this is the funniest thing I've ever read. I could never do this movie.
Right. Okay, so he had good taste on Blazing Saddles.
That's the thing. Wow. He was like, and
he was like, I love the slurs. That's so many.
And I get to say all of them? They're like, no, those are the other characters. You're supposed to be a good guy.
To be clear, I'm slandering John Wayne when I say that.
That is a movie that is very pointedly commenting on American racism.
Yes, sure,
and he got it. And he's for a racist old man, right? And was basically like, this script is really funny. I think it'll be a great movie. His famous line was, I won't do it, but I'll be first in line to see it.
Sure.
And he just was like, I think my fans will murder me. And I don't think it will help your movie. I think it will like lend too much baggage.
I think it would have fucked up the movie.
It would have.
I think he's too He's too big a deal for that movie.
He was 100% right. But like he read that script and was like, I get it. I get what you're doing here. Which makes like the framework of his like absolute dead-on precision, this is the problem with 1941 on paper, all the more like he wasn't just reacting to something being countercultural. He wasn't just being conservative. He was like, this sucks.
Do you know what John Wayne's tombstone says?
Let her rip. That's what Leslie Nielsen's tombstone said. My favorite tombstone of all time.
His tombstone says, feo, fuerte y formal. Spanish for ugly, strong, and dignified. He requested that be on his tombstone. Anyway. 1941. So in 1973, Steven Spielberg made a movie called The Sugarland Express. He had a preview screening for it at USC's film school. And in attendance was Robert Zemeckis.
Bobby Z.
Who is attending film school and tracks down Spielberg and says, please watch my 15-minute short film, A Field of Honor, about a combat veteran who's gone crazy. And he'd written it with his friend Bob Gale. It won the special jury prize at the Student Academy Awards, and Spielberg was blown away by it.
And we covered Zemeckis years ago. That short is notably like a pitch black, hyper like political, sort of like countercultural a satire.
Right.
Wow.
It is the kind of tone that this movie is going for. That's what first gets Zemeckis on Spielberg's radar.
And those guys graduate, Zemeckis and Gale, the two Bobs, as you call them. They write some TV. They work on a movie called Tank about oil protesters.
Well, this is where this sort of
who are going to blow up a building with a Sherman tank.
Right. They have Spielberg's ear. His star just keeps on rising. He's kind of taken them under his wing as proteges. He's also introduced them to John Milius.
Yes, this is how they meet John Milius.
Spielberg once a week goes skeet shooting with John Milius, I believe.
I guess so.
They go out hunting or whatever.
Sure.
And he introduces them, and they're sort of like, how do we write a script that one of these guys will buy? And Milius had some sort of deal set up where he was guaranteed 2 pictures as a director and 3 pictures as a producer. And this is coming off the success of Patton, where there was a big let's valorize the military kind of like trend in Hollywood. So the Tank thing, I think, starts as them being like, how do we write something that would appeal to Milius and also would likely get greenlit? They're just looking to get something off the ground.
Yes, they wrote a script called The Night the Japanese Attacked. Initially, it had a slur in the title. Then it was called The Rising Sun. And they were like, yeah, Wesley Snipes is going to want to make a Rising Sun movie. So we'll hold off on that. So it gets called 1941, this outrageous concept about hysteria on the home front after Pearl Harbor. It is based on 3 events, none of which happened at the same time. Yes. The Japanese sub being sighted off the coast of Santa Barbara in February 42, that happened. That led to the Battle of Los Angeles, where people started shooting in the sky at probably nothing because they thought they were being invaded. And in 1943, the sort of Zoot Suit riots between sailors and Zoot Suiters who were being seen as unpatriotic for not signing up. You know, they were like anti-authority.
But they're like pulling all these pieces of like the whole Ned Beatty plot line of this guy getting a fucking like aircraft gun in his backyard did happen, but not in California and in a different year. But they were just sort of like plucking. I mean, Tank, I'm forgetting what the take on Tank was, but it was some other pitch. And then they bring it to Milius. He's like, but what else are you guys thinking in terms of war? They start talking about the Battle of California. Then it like morphs into like try writing something like that. They think to write it as a drama, and then at some point it shifts into comedy.
Well, Spielberg is looking to make a movie. So Spielberg had made these movies, Jaws and Close Encounters. So you guys like those movies?
Yeah. I like
pretty
those
good.
ones. By the way, I just want to say that I might just get Feo on my grave, just ugly. Forget the strong and dignified. I've been holding that in for a long time. I want
It's
it.
good. You should have fired that off right away.
Jaws is probably my top 10 films of all time.
You're a big Jaws guy.
Love Jaws.
I love Jaws. I love Close Encounters. Actually, maybe I have Close Encounters ranked above Jaws on my personal list, but they're both like incredible movies.
Jurassic Park to me is the king. I mean, like that's like the perfect age. I saw that movie. I just
similar.
But Jaws is like going down to Cape Cod when I was younger and Jaws being on in the summer. It's like the idea of movies even just came from Jaws, I feel like. And that so that's like, and they're the best. It's one of the best of all time. And 1941 is it's a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Spielberg's thinking of how do I follow those 2 movies. He circled a pirate movie that was being written by Jeff Fiskin that he wanted to be like an old-fashioned sort of Errol Flynn movie. He exits that movie because pirate movies are just not hot. He's briefly attached to something called the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings. That was
made, was it not?
Yeah. John Badham directs it, whatever. He also
sounds like a
Matthew Robbins.
Sounds like a Troy McClure movie.
Yes,
it really does.
Yeah.
The conchabulous fantraption of whatever.
It is a Robbins, though, right?
Matthew Robbins wrote it with Hal Barr with the Sugarland Express guys.
Yeah.
He also circled Magic, the haunted puppet movie with Anthony Hopkins that Richard Attenborough ends up making.
Wow. Right.
He was going to make it with De Niro.
Imagine how that puppet would have looked.
Yeah, I don't know. But then he was like, Attenborough did a great job with it, did a better job than me. I don't know. Instead, he's sort of thinking like, what if I do a big swerve, right?
Yeah.
How about a comedy? Milius, I think, was sort of initially going to direct this movie.
Yes. So
John Milius, who's obviously a very chill and normal guy who was kind of older, I feel like, than the rest, maybe a little older than the Spielberg De Palmas, but was sort of friends with all of them.
There was a chain of sort of Coppola mentored Milius.
Right,
and
Milius co-wrote
kind of
Apocalypse Now.
Right.
Yeah.
And Coppola kind of stamped him and verified him, and then he kind of took Spielberg and Lucas under his wing and De Palma. There was this chain in the way that Milius...
But then they pass him. Milius.
Yes, they all do.
I mean, Milius's best known movie is Conan the Barbarian, if you've heard of him.
But all those guys talk about Milius as like the greatest writer amongst all of them. Wiger took a banana out of his pocket. I thought he was happy to see us. And in fact, there was a banana in his pocket. Well, and now he's eating a banana.
We were enjoying your guys' convo. Yeah. You were doing a better job than we could ever do talking about this movie. And we looked at each other and we nodded and we took out food and we started eating.
We decided while you're on your John Milius tangent, we're going to deploy Chekhov's snacks. So Mitch grabbed his kind bar and I grabbed my banana. And we're having a great time. But
we're having a great time.
And Jamie's sitting on the couch, by the way, for all the
Jamie is on the. We should credit Jamie in the title of the episode as the third guest.
Jamie is Emma's dog for people who aren't regular Doughboys listeners. Emma, our producer.
But what I was going to say is Milius has this deal at the time, right? Set up at MGM, so he brings the script to MGM. The first note is, you got to change that fucking title, right? That's when they changed the title. And the head of MGM at the time reads it and is like, I don't get this. Absolutely not. Passes on it.
Right.
Then a year passes. And when Spielberg's like, I don't know what to do next, which I get. I understand how. If you make Jaws when you're in your 20s and is the biggest movie in history, then you follow it up by making this incredibly personal movie that is going over budget and over schedule and everyone thinks is going to be your folly. And then that succeeds wildly.
Right.
You're like, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah.
And you're reading a script like Magic that is good on paper, but you're like, is this too small? Like, how do I outdo myself? What feels like it's living up to the expectation I've set for myself? Like, it is safer to do the thing that on paper seems more dangerous in a certain way.
He's drawn to two things.
Yeah.
He likes the Ferris wheel sequence. His Spielberg brain immediately is sort of like, that'd be fun to do.
Because he's originally just reading it as a friend of the king. Yeah.
But then, secondly, more importantly, he's like, yeah, what if I did something wild and funny? I didn't approach it like as an experiment, but I thought it'd be a great opportunity, he says, to break a lot of furniture, see a lot of glass shattering. It was basically written and directed as one would perform in a demolition derby.
Yes.
I mean, he's sort of saying his mistake there, where he's basically like leading with the spectacle.
Right.
But it's like, this is his Metal Machine music, where he's like, what if it's like all antagonistic and extreme and it's just chaos?
He doesn't have a passion project, so this becomes the clearest thing for him to do.
And Close Encounters felt like, this is my most personal movie. This is the most personal film I'm capable of making at this point. So he's like cashed in that chip already and it's worked. This was the reason I'm winding up this whole thing is when Spielberg signs on, they go to Columbia because he had just done Close Encounters with them to say, this is the next movie I want to make. And in the year that it passed, the now head of Columbia was the guy who had passed on the movie at MGM. And he rereads the script.
Right.
And he's like, I still think this isn't good. I stand by my assessment this isn't good. But I guess if Steven Spielberg wants to make it.
But it wasn't a Columbia movie. It was a Universal movie.
So then he had a first look deal at Universal still left over from Jaws. And the budget was getting so big that he went to Universal and convinced them to team up on it. And Universal ended up getting the bigger piece of it, but it was a co-production. But I just like that everyone involved was like, we said no to this movie 2 years ago. We stand by that you haven't fixed it. But I guess if Spielberg sees something in it, that there's something we're not getting. So everyone's kind of going into this movie being like, bad idea.
It makes total sense why everyone would say yes to it, given his recent track record, and also makes total sense why he would feel a bit of hubris. You know, like it's I understand absolutely how everyone arrived at this. It's just to return to the Ferris wheel real quick, which I think is another good sequence. Like it's like again, there's stuff purely from a visual standpoint that's very engrossing in this movie. I mean, just a high angle shot he does to connect the the people in the Ferris wheel cart to the ground. It's just like. That we're talking one perfect frame. I mean, it's like that. It's a good shot, But I feel like the Ferris wheel becoming unmoored from its hinges and rolling down the boulevard. That feels like something Ben would like. Ben, am I correct there?
Oh, what a great instinct, Wiger.
Did you like 1941, Ben? Yeah, we haven't checked in with your opinion.
Well, okay, so I wanted to be comprehensive, right, going into this.
So you started from watching 1900 and worked your way up to 1941.
I started with year one.
Yeah,
oh,
good.
Better joke.
No, it's okay.
I stepped on it.
But I'm familiar enough with the Ferris wheel, and to answer your question, Wigs, 100%, man.
Hell yeah.
Now, I think Wigs is onto something here, which on paper, this should be your kind of movie. Like, you loved Crime Wave, the Raimi movie that Raimi's kind of disowned.
Yes.
That is similarly all kind of like live-action cartoon, like people bunking each other on the head.
Yelling.
And chaos.
Very slapsticky, yeah.
Right. Done at a very small budget, but like at this kind of manic pitch the entire time. This movie has elements that feel like they should be fucking catnip to you.
Yeah, and even just like the kind of porch-esque quality of it, right?
Yeah,
which
it's big TV movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But no, this could just not grab my interest.
It's a real like eyes sliding off the screen thing.
That's how I felt watching it. The thing I said to you, I already forgot.
That you texted. Yeah.
Was I'm watching 1941 right now, and it's such a slog. I think it's ruining my day. Definitely that, and not just Sunday with 3 children. This anecdote I really like. Spielberg's making Close Encounters. He's talking to Francois Truffaut, one of the great filmmakers and an idol of Steven Spielberg's, who's in the film.
Just be clear, he is actively developing this script, overseeing rewrites while he's making Close Encounters.
Truffaut says, and this is Spielberg quoting him, "I like you with kids. You are wonderful with kids. You must do a movie with just kids." And Spielberg's like, well, yeah, I've always wanted to do something like that, but I've got to finish this, and then I'm going to do 1941. It's just this movie about the Japanese attacking Los Angeles. And Truffaut just apparently said, "You are the child." And was like, "You're making a huge mistake." Yeah. So Truffaut was right. And he takes Truffaut's advice and is like, I guess I'll knock out a kind of like Raiders, E.T. double bill after this, just kind of fucking level it out. That's the thing about Spielberg, where you're like, oh, 1941, what a bomb. How'd he follow that up? It's like, I don't know, Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T.
Yes.
So maybe just go and like suck his dick.
But this is, I gladly. But this is what is fascinating to me. Talking about this movie, just like the weirdness of it treating World War II like it was a canard, right? Like this movie tries to like wag the dog World War II, or like the thing that like Dr. Strangelove does, where it like creates an incident that never happened, right? Based around like the Cold War and the missile crisis and paranoia and all this sort of stuff. He's like riffing on a thing that we know turned out horrifically.
Right.
For like most of the planet.
Yes. Bad.
Right. And then the movie he does right after this is a like adventure serial where the villains are the Nazis set during the exact same time period.
True.
And he finds the right way to thread the needle. And of course, like post Schindler, he said, like, I couldn't do another Indiana Jones movie where the villains are Nazis because I took it too seriously at that point and I didn't want to make light of it. Mm-hmm. But you're like, fucking Last Crusade and Raiders have this balance on like somehow keeping in mind the enormity of the tragedy and the villainy and all of that sort of stuff without it being distracting. Whereas this movie, you're just like, hey, can we just like remember what's going on in the background here?
Yeah, you're right. There's so much to say. I mean, he also tried to make this movie called Growing Up. I'm just going to kind of move past that. We can talk about it later episode.
Was Growing Up the original sort of Fabelmans?
Yeah, people sort of think that. Zemeckis and Gale wrote it for him because he was like, do you want to write a movie about kids for me?
Yeah.
And they said like it was like a nerd versus jocks thing. It wasn't like a sensitive like divorce movie.
Yeah.
And that they like got some money and Spielberg was like casting kids and Caleb Deschanel, the cinematographer, was like, this fucking sucks. This script is ass. And like, I don't think you have a good idea here. And Spielberg is like, yeah, forget it. I won't do this. And E.T. is what he sort of settles on later. Anyway, instead he decides to do this gigantic, overwhelming, expensive movie, even though this is a comedy about, again, nothing in particular. It just screams like money. It's crowds, sets, explosions, like you're saying. Like, it's like that Armageddon commentary where, the iconic DVD commentary for Armageddon where Ben Affleck is like 3 sheets to the wind. And like in the first scene, there's the helicopter is taking off behind Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck on the oil rig. And Ben Affleck's like, that just costs $250,000.
Right.
Like, it doesn't need to be there. It's not part of the plot. There doesn't need to be a helicopter taking off right now. And that's just $250,000, like right behind us, just like drowning us out. That's what this movie is all the time.
This movie feels like that is the explicit purpose of every scene.
Right.
Like
Loud,
the center of every
yelling.
scene is the most expensive thing that's happening in the scene, not just as a background element.
But also, who is the star of this movie?
Great question.
Because I walked into this movie, I loaded this movie up being like, well, Belushi is kind of the star, right? And it's like, no, Belushi's just punctuation.
It's a classic Aykroyd-Belushi two-hander, and I'm watching it, and like an hour and 20 minutes in, I was like, Jesus Christ, are they never going to interact in this movie?
Yeah.
There's the point where they're both on the same street, but I think Aykroyd's knocked out and Belushi's on the other end, and I'm like, but they're physically in the same space. Are they finally going to link up? And then they like go off in opposite directions. And at the end of the movie, they salute each other in coverage. They literally never appear in the same shot. It is so insane to make a Belushi-Aykroyd comedy in 1979 and go, what if they never talk to each other?
That's that was it. I feel like it has that problem of like a Caddyshack or something, which, by the way, I love Caddyshack, of course.
Caddyshack's pretty good.
But the Wally is maybe, and Wally doesn't do a bad job. That guy Wally, I'm like
the young guy,
young guy.
He's
my cat's name. I love the name. I just am like. This is maybe the main character of the movie.
This
right?
is the character who wins the dance contest.
Yes,
So it's kind of the Zoot Suiter. And
that's right.
It's he's the closest thing there is to a lead, but he's like kind of hard to track, and he seems like a peripheral character the way he's introduced.
The extended cut is mostly adding in the meat of his story.
Because he's in I Want to Hold Your Hand. He's in the Zemeckis movie, I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is the year before
carries over Wendy Jo Sperber and Eddie Deezen and a lot of early Zemeckis stock company people that we talked about when we did that series.
I think he's pretty good in this. I was actually surprised that he didn't do too. I mean, he'd worked consistently, but nothing really huge.
Never got famous. No. Did kind of just fizzle out. He does. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just sort of like there's other guys like him.
Yeah, but they talked about, like, as the script was getting unwieldy, Gale and Zemeckis were like, we should identify a kind of like central viewpoint character that you can go back to with like an emotional through line to track as we're like cutting across all these storylines. Sort of. Look, he's not bad, but in the like cacophony of this movie, it doesn't like help clarify the movie, and you're also like, this isn't that gripping against the scale of the other shit happening. And Universal famously like freaked out like 6 weeks before this movie came out. And were like, this thing is unwieldy and their expectations are another Spielberg blockbuster. You need to cut 30 minutes out. And they cut 30 minutes out like last second. And unsurprisingly, they cut down the 30 minutes with the least famous person.
Right.
So
which he is the most boring though. I mean, like, it also is like, I do want to see more Belushi. I want to see the other people, but it just doesn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
He's the most vanilla character, but although vanilla is a flavor, but he's like the most like just kind of straight laced, like, like the closest thing the movie has to protagonist. But even the way he's introduced in the diner, Glenn Miller's In the Mood is playing, and he's doing the jitterbug, like. He seems crazy there. The way that you're onboarded to this character, because they're making, like, he's washing dishes. They're doing a little Hobbit dishwashing song, and you
don't even know if you're supposed to like.
You don't even know you're supposed to like him. Like, and then the other guy who's making breakfast is like dropping whole eggs with shell onto the flat top, and it's just like, what is going on here? Everyone's just
the amount of shit that happens in the first 15 minutes of this movie. It is disorienting because you like cannot find a handle of like, what am I supposed to be focusing on?
Yeah.
Let's also just acknowledge the cold open of this movie is like, I feel like one of the most infamously hubristic moments.
Yes.
It is the thing where like Spielberg talks about everyone wanted to take him down a peg. They were looking for like a way to ding his armor. everyone's going into this movie. The expectations are unreasonable. Even if it had been good but not great, people would have had their knives out. And the opening scene of the movie is Spielberg parodying himself.
Yeah.
And people just take out machetes. And they're just like, fuck this so hard right off the bat.
Look, we talked about this a little before we started recording. And I did that. My first thing that I wrote down, of course, is the first thing that happens in the movie. But I was like, would the Jaws parody annoy me today? Like if it was a different director that was parodying his own movie? And I don't know if I maybe would even like it. I can't tell. But there's a lot of hubris from Spielberg. But it doesn't bother me that much, I guess. But also, is that through the lens of me being a child that was raised on Jaws and loving Jaws? I don't know.
I think it plays it feels pretty obnoxious to like parody your own thing. It feels a little, I understand as a way to start the movie, it's a little off-putting.
Yeah. I was just saying, I gave it points for being hornier.
It is a little hornier. It's the same actress, right?
Way hornier. It's the same actress. And part of this is maybe the weird Zemeckis thing. Because Zemeckis is, as we uncovered, maybe the horniest man alive.
But like horny in a very like old school, kind of like a GI who has, like a sort of busty lady pinned up in his locker or whatever, where he's like, check a load, whoa. Like that's his horny vibe.
Did I say this in our Here episode?
I don't know.
That I was communicated to by someone who had worked with Zemeckis on developing a project that didn't happen in the last 5 years, and said that they had a meeting with him for 3 hours, and the only two things he wanted to talk about were boobs and special effects.
What did he want to say about boobs?
Everything, apparently.
I don't understand.
But had no story notes, casting ideas.
He's just like, I'm thinking big boobs for this one.
But just like, you know what I like? Areolas.
Jesus Christ.
By the way, if there was if the shark was there and his fin got bigger after seeing the girl or something, I would have liked something like that. Like, give me the naked gun.
That's already funnier.
That's already a better bit.
Give me the naked gun version. Why are you holding backwards just a halfway point?
Spielberg is too smart, and I think Zemeckis and Gale are too smart to actually do the great naked gun shit. Where it's like, this should have no rocks in its brains. Like it should be so dumb.
Can I open a little naked gun tangent here?
Please.
I do a yearly rewatch of the trilogy.
Great.
The first, second, and third funniest movies ever made. Did that pretty recently, right? Naked Gun 2.5, which is the first one that David Zucker directs solo. But Jerry Zucker and Jim Abrahams were still producers and writers on it. So they were all involved. Comes out after Ghost, which Jerry had directed solo, had been this big transition, I'm a serious filmmaker movie that's a huge blockbuster and an Oscar nominee and winner and everything. Naked Gun 2.5 parodies Ghost. It is like the only other example I could really think of the exact same thing you're saying, Mitch.
Making fun of your own movie.
Doing it that closely after, right? There's the slight bit of difference of this is David kind of ribbing his brother, right? Yeah. So it's not quite the same director, but Jerry's still involved. It's not the cold open. It was the trailer for the movie.
Right.
It doesn't feel galling. It feels like kind of funny that it's like this guy who went serious is cutting himself back down to size. And also, it's within a framework where that is what is expected. If you're going to make a Naked Gun movie after you've made a Best Picture nominee, you have to make fun of yourself, right? Like everything needs to be on the table. But watching that and thinking of other spoof movies and everything, it hit me while watching 1941 last night. Is there a fundamental rule that if you're spoofing something, it has to cost less money than the real thing you're spoofing?
It should look a little jankier. Yeah, it should look better. I think that's kind of like a sketch comedy sort of rule. Yeah,
and I feel like, you guys have worked in the same kind of sketch comedy doldrums that I have, and especially 2000s video sketches.
Yeah.
There is a level where the production value is so bad that it actually fails to function as a parody. I think of a lot of what if Wes Anderson directed blank videos that are bad, where you're if you can't successfully approximate his style, the satire doesn't work. But yet, you need to get within spitting distance. And Mel Brooks movies, Naked Gun movies, all of them hit the right balance of this is done with genuine craft. They approximate the thing just enough. but it doesn't feel like you're thinking about how much it cost.
There's almost
Whereas
like So sorry,
like, did this cost more than any other war movie that had been made up until that point?
I mean, that's a fair
point. It's kind of the Last Action Hero sort of issue too, right? It's just like that feels like kind of too, and Last Action Hero works better than 1941, but it kind of feels too expensive to be a parody. Yeah, there's kind of like a weird like double uncanny valley with parody, because it's like there's also, you can though have like a TikTok where someone has like a paper bag over their head, and that kind of works. But then once you start making it feel like a real thing, it needs to have a certain level of fidelity behind it to feel like a parody. But then you go too far, and then it stops feeling like it's any fun at all.
You're dead on, right? Because you can get away with nothing, or you can get away with getting fairly close, but you can't go over. And ideally, you want to exist in that like middle space, which is really hard to hit.
And you're right,
precisely.
That whole sequence of her going up on the periscope, or like it looks great. It looks
impressive.
It looks impressive. It does, But then the payoff is like a Japanese man being like, Hollywood, like seeing the girl's butt,
and truly doing like Borat horny noises at her. Like, I mean, it's like you're just like, oh, okay, cool, great.
Right, because the bit is you start with the same actress doing the same night swim scene from Jaws,
and then they're kind of mimicking the music, and then they're just doing the music.
Right.
To be John Williams' score for 1941 kind of goes.
It kind of goes.
He showed up.
It was earwormed into my head last night when I was trying to fall asleep. But, rather than a shark, the thing that pops out of the water is this German submarine, and she's riding on the, like, periscope, and it feels very phallic. And then, as you said, these soldiers all come out. The Jaws opening is just this classic, like, man, look at the fucking Spielberg magic. They couldn't get the shark to work. He had to design a sequence where you don't see the shark. It's all suggestion. You're like, that sequence costs so little money to construct.
True.
The moment the submarine starts coming out of the water and she's like straddling the periscope, you're like, too expensive. Yeah. Too expensive, too complicated, not funny. It's like you have made something more technically complex than the thing you're parodying.
There's another bit of self-reference in this as well, right? Is because I believe is it the actress from Duel, the gas station operator who's also in
the
this?
Snakes lady.
The Snakes lady,
and
it's when Belushi fills up his plane, and then
Like I'm almost astonished this movie doesn't have a Close Encounters parody as well.
That sequence is kind of funny.
I think
the plane, like the gas are up, and then like the gas going everywhere. It's kind of funny.
I guess the nozzle, the unwieldy nozzle, kind of like being similar to the snakes. I guess that's what it's trying to reference. I don't know. Maybe it's that part's okay.
I just like Sims so half-heartedly being like, it's kind of funny.
It kind of works.
I was sort of chuckling.
Yeah,
but also like Spielberg says this on the fucking Laserdisc where he's like, this is something only Duel diehards will pick up. But I'm like, right at the time of this release, it's like Duel is a TV movie.
If you caught it on television, right? It's not like you can go check out the VHS.
That's like not a thing that most people are going to pick up on. Can I just read my full 1941 laugh list?
Okay, go ahead.
1,
I love it.
Reveal of Japanese soldiers disguised as Xmas trees.
Oh, sure.
Which is cut. It's cut in the version I saw.
That's not the theatrical
that's
an extended cut.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I found out in watching this making of that's a direct lift from a Marx Brothers movie that he was like, I want to do the Christmas tree bit. Number 2, I wrote almost everything Slim Pickens does.
Yeah,
I think this is the most wholly successful performance, but also like subplot.
He's just Slim Pickens. That guy's fucking funny.
But to Mitch's point, there's kind of like a clearer comedic game in his little section that makes sense. We'll circle back to this. Number 3, I did put down Belushi with the Coke bottle. Got an out loud ha for me. Number 4, Eddie Deezen revealing the ventriloquist dummy.
Insane. So. By the way,
the way it's revealed.
It's really
and
weird.
We'll get to it.
I have a question for you guys.
Please.
Because you said he almost did this movie Magic, and then I was like, was this a nod to that movie?
Had to be.
It must be, right?
Wow.
To be. Because the other thing is they wrote the script where the 2 guys in the carousel were supposed to be
Abbott and Costello?
Art Carney and Jackie Gleason.
Oh, that's who it was. The honeymooners.
Sure.
Right?
And they even wrote it as like one guy's a mailman and the other guy's they wrote it in the script that way. Then they have Spielberg on board. They're like, we can get anyone they want. They reach out to Jackie Gleason's agent and they relay back Jackie Gleason refuses to ever work with Art Carney again.
Oh, damn. Okay, right. Well, Jackie Gleason was a bit of a tough customer.
And I Want to Hold Your Hand had come out at this point, and Spielberg was like, where did you find this fucking Eddie Deezen guy?
Right.
Rewrite it and make it Deezen and an old guy. So it's Deezen and the mayor from Jaws. But like, I don't think he would have given Art Carney a ventriloquist dummy. I think you're dead on that was like a weird him making jokes about movies he didn't direct.
But again, it just kind of feels like, it's just, well, let's throw more props at this and more explosions and more. Yeah, it's
I'm not that I laughed at it. The physicality at the reveal of you see a blanket next to him and it slowly rises.
It's pretty funny.
And then the head lifts up. I gave a half chuckle at Belushi as old man eating spaghetti. The weird cutaway to Belushi's cameo as a second non-speaking character.
Yeah.
I gave a half chuckle to water coming out of the dummy's nose at the end of the film.
That's pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
And then 2 full laughs at the dummy getting its own credit in the end credits.
Yeah, that was good.
And the explosions during the credits, which are the most I laughed in the entire movie.
Joe Flaherty getting the with in the credits of all these people. And Joe Flaherty's good.
I think he's good in this.
Clear.
Sure.
He kind of crushes his scene.
He's
But let's also say, in terms of like this movie,
R.I.P. Joe Flaherty recently
passed.
departed. Yes.
And
the
treat.
unfunny in a way that almost defies logic.
Yeah.
This is a movie that has like 4 cast members from Stripes,
Right.
3 cast members from Laverne and Shirley,
Bunch of SNL
2
people.
SCTV people, 2 SNL people. Like, it is pulling from all the groups of the peaks of comedy, both like commercial and in like snob circles at the time. On top of like 10 dramatic film legends, including Toshiro Mifune?
Yes.
In his only like movie that he spoke English in or whatever. Yes.
Every other American film he made, he was dubbed over by Paul Frees.
Cool.
Who I believe is the ghost host from, or the narrator from the Haunted Mansion ride.
Right. Victor Freeze, of course, was Batman's enemy.
Well,
who fell in a bunch of ice cubes. Right. Yeah.
He's sort of a tragic figure because his wife Nora Freeze, of course.
Yeah, right.
Wait, they dubbed over him?
Over Mr. Freeze? Yes, they did. No,
they would dub over Toshiro Mifune in every other American film he did.
His English dialogue, yes.
This is the only American studio film in which he actually speaks.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard that he like yelled at all the like extras off. He like got them in line for the movies. The IMDb trivia says that he like got all the extras in line and was like, "That's not how soldiers act," and like got them acting like soldiers.
Yeah.
That's cool.
God, if he yelled at me, I would melt into
Gail
water.
said by the end of filming, those men would have died for him.
Hell yeah.
But like
now my wife walked out because she didn't watch any of the movie, but she came outside when I was watching it once, and she came to the living area during the credits. And
this
the credits
is when she was packing her bags.
Yes,
right?
yeah. Just signed a new lease. We're very happy for her. So like every like third card or whatever, there's just like a random explosion that comes up, and she watches it and she does laugh at it because she's like, "Why the fuck are things exploding during the credits?" But it's kind of a microcosm for the movie as a whole, right? You're just watching it as like, why are there inexplicable explosions every every 4 seconds? Like, what is going on exactly?
I have one thought on the credits as well. First of all, there's 2 thoughts here. One, the dummy is sentient because it notices things before the guy from Critters notices things. I forgot his name already.
Eddie Deezen?
Eddie Deezen.
Who
didn't have as big of a career as I thought either. I was surprised by
He was in a lot of
He's a
stuff in the
weird
80s.
figure.
Specific career.
Yes.
Very specific.
We covered him when we were doing the Zemeckis movies, but he was this discovery, and they were like, he's just like this, and no one else is like this, and you put him on screen, and he goes.
Right.
And then he started getting bigger opportunities, and people were like, oh, he can't memorize dialogue. He can't take direction.
Right.
He can't hit marks. You can sort of just let him like spin out.
Yeah.
But it was hard for people to figure out how to put him in any other context.
I love watching him spin out. He is very. When I first heard his voice, I was like, "What is this character?" And then I was like, "Oh my god, it's Eddie D. It's the guy from Critters, Eddie Deezen."
He famously was also the voice of Mandark on Dexter's Laboratory.
Oh yeah. Oh right.
It's Dexter's enemy.
Yes.
His rival, the sort of Grimes to Dexter's.
Correct.
And he's probably old enough where his entire childhood was pre D's nuts, so he avoided that.
That's
that would have been tough.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
He is very active on Facebook, and he is often posting about how
never a good sign.
He is often posting Get ready.
Yeah.
He's often posting about how he's been banned from local LA diners because the waitresses got uncomfortable by his compliments.
Oh boy.
He's one of these.
With
You're
the
not
dummy?
allowed to tell a lady to smile anymore.
I'm hoping the dummy is the one doing, which by the way, the dummy is credited in the end credits. The dummy.
Yeah, got a full laugh.
Good
out of it.
gag.
I mentioned that as one of his laugh lines.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what was on your. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but just be clear, 2 of the laugh lines were things that happened during the credits.
Right, which you have to, especially after the director's commentary is 2.5 hours.
2.5.
Like
Jesus.
later. I'm going to read something from the dossier that I do
Please.
think underlines what we're saying, which is Zemeckis and Gale are like, look, our script was cynical. It was like a dark movie, like a dark comedy. And then Steve comes in and, his tone is very different and it becomes more of a screwball comedy. And Spielberg's like, yeah, I was just trying to max out visual gags.
Yeah.
My role models were Hell's a Poppin' with Red Skeleton, Preston Sturges screwball comedies. Basically kind of like there shouldn't be like something should be happening every second, right? Like that's sort of, to me, that's, if you think that of a Preston Sturges movie, you're reading it wrong.
Correct.
But like obviously Preston Sturges movies, the dialogue is very fast. There's lots of jokes.
But
I
they
get
are
that.
so intricately set up that the
Incredibly-
big laughs come from like, oh my God, you put all the pieces in place perfectly. And for 15 minutes, it's been leading to this very clear, understandable sort of like conflict or whatever it is. I mean, here are a couple things he said in this
But I
retrospective.
mean,
Yeah.
Looney Tunes becomes the thing he's
He
referencing.
brings
Yes.
Chuck Jones
did.
in during development and says, Chuck, I want you to come up with the wildest visual gags you can. And like Chuck Jones comes up with a gag that's sort of like an explosion of the moment where Tim Matheson drops the bomb and it's rolling towards the speech, where the bomb is sentient and it's like rolling through the town on Main Street
Right.
and driving everyone crazy. And it's like 5 minutes of the bomb rolling everywhere in town. And Spielberg was like, I don't know how to achieve this. And he was like, it was a great sequence and it would have been great in animation, but I couldn't even begin
This
to
is
figure
the
out how to
Tintin
film
thing.
it.
Yeah.
And then he says, and this interview is from
This is
maybe the
long
early
ago,
90s or
right.
the late 80s. He goes, today you probably could figure out a way to do it with CGI, computer-generated imagery.
Right. It's
And
a
I'm
new
like,
concept.
What a
right.
time capsule that he was like, oh, I used insider lingo.
Right.
The other thing he said was he was like, at the time people complained that the movie was too loud and too chaotic and cacophonous. And I look at it now and I'm like, it's no different than playing Doom.
Oh,
Wow.
And-
Spielberg the gamer.
And then he
By
went
the
like,
way, not true. Doom
No.
is very like kind of quiet and freaky.
Quotidian.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Aspire. But he was like, yeah, I don't think the movie is that different from one of the CD-ROM games that kids would play.
Dear God. Well, he was right about the current Doom is very similar, but he didn't have a pre-copy
Yes.
of Doom
But I feel-
2016 or whatever.
No, he's
Doom
talking about
isn't
the old
that
shareware
chaotic.
Doom. Yeah, no, it's there's. I
Yeah.
mean, like whatever. There's some.
There's demons.
Yeah, there's demon. But it's like there are moments of just walking down corridors.
Right.
Right, Doom is like Skinamarink. Like the first Doom is like liminal horror.
Yes. Much better paced. There's moments of quiet in it. It feels much better than that.
Right, which this
There's also
movie
a
has
wait.
no moments.
There's also a BFG in Doom, but it has its
Yes, there is
acronym.
the big
A
F gun. Yes.
J.
BFJ. Is Quake just like kind of goth Doom? Is that all Quake really did to Doom?
Huge question.
I guess it's got some more Lovecraft in it too.
Yeah,
Like it's
kind
like
of
a
like
little
a
more
little
eldritch
more.
horror. Yeah, but it's
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of. I mean, the big Quake thing was a fully 3D engine. It was like this kind of 2.5D thing they were doing with
Right,
Doom
with
and
Doom,
Wolfenstein.
you can't actually. Right, you're strafing and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Okay, you still have Quake. Anyway, this is the most interesting thing Spielberg says.
Okay.
So he says, I sort of saw the movie 1941 as a big Hollywood musical, like an old-fashioned Golden Age musical. And I had talked with John Williams about doing like 8 big
Yes.
band numbers, like big numbers. And the the Jitterbug contest is kind of the only thing that remains of that concept.
Mhm.
And he's like, I kind of regret not making it just a big musical.
Yeah.
Now that's one of those things I hear where I'm like, that is a good idea.
Yeah.
But you're insane.
Right.
Like, if that's your idea, then that's a different movie, and
Start
you should
from
make that
square
movie. Start
one.
from square
Right,
one.
right.
Exactly. Like,
Now, he frames it as...
it really just sounds like they're like, oh, could we have explosions and musical sequences and like boobs and money and it's just they're throwing everything in there.
He frames it in this interview as, I didn't have the courage of my convictions at that time to follow through on that, right? And then he's like, I had this anything goes principle. And basically, at the beginning of Temple of Doom, I do the type of musical number I wanted to do in 1941. There is one other movie Spielberg has made that was originally developed, or at least temporarily developed as a musical, and then he welched on it for the same reasons. Where he's like, I got scared, I didn't know if I could tackle it, I took all the songs out.
Amistad?
Do you know what movie that is? Correct. No. Do you know what it is, David?
I feel like I do, and I'm going to be annoyed when I'm going to guess.
It is, spoilers, the other movie I put on the same tier as this in Spielberg's filmography. Correct.
Hook.
Correct.
Oh,
Which is
that
also
makes
left
sense.
with one song where the daughter sings on the ship.
Which is a nice sequence.
But I believe 5 songs were written for that movie. And he just similarly said, I got freaked out by doing it. And you hear this thing across his career that he always wanted to make a musical. And I do think it's fascinating that when he finally did it, he was like, if I start with West Side Story.
Right. I'll just make one of the most famous musicals of all time. And then I'll
kind of
fucking
proven.
nail it. I'll just like do all the other stuff real good.
But he kept toying with trying to make his own original musical and then being like, I don't know if I can pull it off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Y'all like his West Side Story? I'm a big fan.
I think it is one of the most like jaw-dropping, incredible movies ever made, and Griffin thought it was okay.
I like it quite a bit, which gets framed as me hating it.
I was setting you up for this.
Yes, I think some of it is extraordinary. I think Ansel Elgort is kind of the Achilles heel of the movie, which feeds into a bigger Spielberg failing to identify good young leading men thing that hits the last 10, 15 years of his career.
What's he been up to?
Yeah, what's he been up to? Where'd he go?
Where'd he go?
Where's he hiding?
Hey, Ansel! Where's the boy at? Ansel, come on!
Mitch, you like the Spielberg West Side Story?
I like it quite a bit. I'm probably in between Griffin Sims, I would say, is probably where I land on it. I'll say this.
Great place to be.
Because this made me think of it.
It's empty right now. There's no one here.
Join us.
Perfect. I'd fit in perfectly with a little puzzle piece. I
jump through the screen.
My question to you, this is a kind of a hot take. That the dance sequence in this, the punch fight dance sequence, if that came out this decade, would it be amongst one of the best dance sequences in the last 10 years?
This is the fucking thing with Spielberg. You're like, I feel like we talk about this. We use this as like a gauge or descriptor a lot. But the types of movies where like if you were at a bar and this was playing on TV or projected on the wall behind you with the sound off and you're catching glimpses of it, you're like, does this rule?
Right.
Yeah.
Do I need to watch this? And the second you actually lock in and watch it sound on as a movie, you're like, this is a mess. But if you just looked over your shoulder while you were drinking and saw that staging for 15 seconds, you'd be like, oh, so this is one of his masterpieces.
It looks rad. And again, I don't want to belabor Red One, but if you took the Krampus set piece in Red One, the Slack fight, if you took Krampus Schlacht, and you remove that and instead substituted this jitterbug dance contest, like it'd be like, hey, you know what? At least Red One has blank. At least that sequence is cool. So I think you're right. But I did feel very like it does feel like a proto West Side Story. Like even the scoring there, the John Williams kind of simulacrum of like a Louis Prima sort of a big band number is kind of Leonard Bernstein-y. It is kind of like it's I don't know that's one of the few times in the movie where I feel like everything just kind of comes together.
Hot take, better than any dance sequence in La La Land, for instance.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
I don't know how hot
example.
of a take
No,
that
I mean,
is.
like that's I don't feel like that's a film that's like its choreography is mind blowing.
Yeah,
it's got some cool
that's
shit.
fine. But also,
I
La
think
La
that
Land
is the failing of almost all modern movie musicals.
Yeah, I think La La Land's even right. I mean, that's why Better Man, which is out in theaters right now, probably gone by the time.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be gone by the time we finish recording.
Better
even though
Man
it came out 3 days ago.
Exactly, is really trying to solve those problems of like, it's like, well, how do I shoot a musical sequence in a movie?
Yeah.
Do I just have a wide so you can see all the dancing and see the sort of choreography all together? That's boring though. It's static. Or do I cut into the action a bunch and now I'm like, messing up the rhythm of the songs and of the, of everything. And
the CGI
Man
goop layer though
really
doesn't help the Better Man.
No, not
you
at all.
saw Better Man. I saw
Better
Better Man.
I saw it at TIFF, and I I don't hate Better Man, weirdly. It's a very confusing movie, but I do think that this dance sequence feels so much more authentic and real than almost anything I've seen.
It's a huge set. It's a huge crowd. Yeah.
I think you're spot on. And like, it's the thing I always complain about is I see modern movie musicals and I either feel like the choreography was sort of an afterthought. It was the last piece of the puzzle and the one they didn't devote enough time and practice and thought to. Or the dance has been worked out and
we can't see it.
There is not confidence in the way it is shot and cut.
We're just not getting to see it as in its sort of full form.
And it feels like it's always either or, and it's part of what like makes you wish that Spielberg had made 5 musicals in his career, where you're like, the way he treats action and the basic staging and blocking of like dialogue scenes shows such an understanding of how you should approach a musical, and you'll get those moments that are static.
Yeah.
But also to your point, Mitch, there is the moment in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where like the Russian spies or whatever are like circling them, and he's at the diner with Mutt Williams. And
character.
Mutt like starts a fake fight between
R.I.P. Mutt.
like the preppy college guys. R.I.P. Mutt, a true hero,
Not canonically dead.
And
of course, I know.
He had the courage that John Wayne lacked.
Yeah, John Wayne, that
Mutt
yellow
gave
belly
his
coward.
life. But do you know the moment I'm talking about where Mutt basically
Vaguely,
like
sure, starts the fight at the diner.
he starts a fight between like the preppies and the bikers so that there's a distraction they can break out. And I'm like, that's like a version of Spielberg almost trying to do the same thing he does in the Zoot Suit sequence visually, that he is able to contain within like 25 seconds.
Right.
Where you're like, there is an economy and a cleanness to that.
He's the best at that
Totally.
stuff. Yeah.
Whereas this is the one time I feel like almost in his entire career where he's not doing the incredible Spielberg math of how do I simplify this sequence as much as possible? His greatest skill set is to like show up on the day and go like, how do we make this the fewest number of shots? How do we like find the way to like convey this information as quickly and cleanly as possible and with a little bit of charm and wit?
David.
Yeah.
That's gotta hurt. That's a quip. That's a quip that people make. Or like, do not go in there. That's like another quip. But if they're saying that's gotta hurt, maybe they're saying it about root canals. And if they're saying do not go in there, maybe they're saying it about a mouth with a bunch of plaque buildup. My point here is if you want to avoid being the subject of quips like that, maybe you should use our sponsor today, Quip.
Yeah, so why don't you get yourself Quip 360? It's an oscillating toothbrush, Griffin, that's literally going to revolve around you.
That's what I like.
I've been using Quip for a long time, but the 360 is the the kind of like round brush.
Sure. Yeah. This
so
is the whole thing with Quip. It's an electric toothbrush that doesn't overcomplicate the most basic daily ritual. I feel like Quip just exists to make this as easy as possible.
Right, very simple designs, ultra quiet, super clean, easy to maintain, and is scientifically, according to the American Dental Association, scientifically proven to remove up to 11 times more plaque between teeth compared to a manual toothbrush and provide up to 2 times more whitening on day 1. And if you don't like it, return it for free within 30 days.
It's fine. It's easy to travel with. It is convenient. It's easy to clean. And if you do love it, you can brush easy, knowing you get a free lifetime warranty for purchasing on GetQuip. That's QUIP.com. And the opportunity to subscribe to Refill Heads by mail every 3 months so you never have to go to the store. This is a part I like. That's the kind of thing I forget.
You don't have to go to the store. It just happens. They just send it to you.
It shows up and you go, oh, right,
I get
time
floss
to change.
too. I get a bunch of Quip stuff sent to me every, few months. It's really, really helpful. They've got 25,000 5-star reviews and, people love Quip.
And they got a perks program. I love perks programs.
You do love
Quip perks. Quip perks is a little hard to say. I'm going to say that's just for me. Quip puts their money where their mouth is. When you subscribe to AutoShip, you'll be enrolled in Quip perks to earn credit back over time.
Just for listeners of Blank Check, get 20% off site-wide and a free travel case and counter's top stand at getquip.com/check. That's getquip.com/check.
Free your mouth today and save 20% site-wide plus a free travel case and countertop stand at getquip. QUIP.com/check.
Get Quip. QUIP.com/check. Quip.
Quip.
I will say that. So there's the and I don't know how sequential we're going here, but the
I don't think we can because I don't remember the sequence. Like it's too boring.
It's not a coherent sequence of events.
I mean,
it's just like a bunch of shit that happens.
There's big sequences, right? But they don't really knock onto each other that importantly anyway.
So Belushi going into the city, and like his plane is pursuing the other plane with the the horny airplane lady, and the guy who's trying to seduce her.
Which God bless her.
God bless her.
Tim Matheson. The straight arrow.
As horny as the Jaws
fucking
opening.
Animal House actors.
It does, yeah.
Oh, you're right.
As horny as the Jaws opening is, I wanted the movie to be more horny, so I was happy with the horny plane stuff.
That is fun. So they're like
the Titan.
That. It's kind of a Titan.
The plane Titan.
Yeah. So they're the birthing sequence at the end is really unsettling. After she pretends to be a guy's dead son for an hour. The movie's wild, man. Anyway, so there's the two there's like the dogfight, right? The plane pursuing the other plane through the city, and like his sense of geography, like he uses the Roosevelt Hotel sign as like kind of a landmark, and like there's like 4 consecutive shots where you're seeing the Roosevelt Hotel. I think that's whatever the sign is. Like from 4 different angles, just so you can get a sense of like where all the anti-aircraft batteries and where all the civilians on the ground and where the planes are in relation to each other. And it's just like this guy is just the fucking best at this. Yeah. Like this is so. He makes this the 3D environment is represented a 2D plane in a way that makes complete visual sense to anyone who's watching it. So you do have stuff like that where it's just like, again, this is just like really exceptional craft.
Which, by the way, there is a moment in that where I got annoyed where they're like, we're going to take Hollywood to Highland. And I was like, you're at Hollywood and Highland. You remember when the tank guy is yelling that? It fucking annoyed
geography.
me.
Right.
Sorry.
To the point of what Sims just said. No. What's crazy is that like he can't stop himself from doing that shit, from like the constant like geographical centering, like giving the audience the visual information to understand the relationship between images. Story-wise, he is almost pointedly doing the opposite. Like you saying it's hard to recount this movie in order, it feels like there is very little relationship between scenes in this movie.
Yes.
Right. And like I understand part of it is that it's doing this kind of tapestry, like 10 different plot thread stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like actually hard to keep track of any level of cause and effect in this movie.
100%.
And part of it is just realizing this as we were saying it, like there are like 6 different fundamental misunderstandings in this movie.
Right.
Like unlike something like a lot of these sort of like satirical war movies, right? Where you're like, the Russians are coming. There's like one thing of like a Russian shows up in town and they think it's an invasion. Like Dr. Strangelove, one wrong call is made kind of shit. This movie just keeps stacking up misunderstandings.
And they don't really some interact and some don't.
But a lot of them don't, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're
like the submarine thing kind of is a self-contained story.
And it sort of has nothing to do with Belushi, who's just on his shit, but thinks he's being attacked because Tim Matheson is trying to get laid because Nancy Allen only wants to fuck inside a plane.
Right. And then there's like the Warren Oates character who's kind of like the Sterling Hayden character from Dr. Strangelove.
Loves violence.
But we barely see him.
Yes.
And he's like only spoken of for a while. And then when he shows up, it's kind of like an hour into the movie and you don't care.
Right. And you're like, they're right. Everyone's right that the Japanese do want to attack California, but also the Japanese have no understanding of geography. So you have this whole misunderstanding based on where they are.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone reacting to a threat that is real, that they're misunderstanding, but also the people who are the threat are fucking up.
The threat is also not real,
no.
but of course it is real.
It's
that World War II is real.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And will be a thing, just not here.
Right.
This ties into the Treat Williams character. I didn't know if he was a good guy. I was like, is he going to end up with a girl at the end of the movie? And then
he's an asshole.
No,
he's somewhere between Bluto and the Hillside Strangler. He's like he's either like a fun villain or the worst man in the world. He's like trying to grab. He sucks.
Yeah. He's kind of just a straight up sort of sociopath bully. Like, I mean, Treat Williams is fine at that, but you're kind of like, what's this character doing here?
Bob Gale was saying that one of their big ideas they had when they were like, Spielberg saying like, keep on coming up with more and more. And they were like, you know what's a funny setup? A guy desperate to lose his virginity in the middle of warfare.
Yeah,
And I was like, okay. And they're like, so we had this whole scene written where they're like hiding out under tanks trying to fuck because the guy's so worried he's going to die before he loses his virginity.
Yeah.
And then as he's explaining it, I realize he's talking about the Treat Williams character.
God.
Wow.
And in the movie, there's the reveal of the tank moving and her running away in terror because he's been trying to sexually assault her.
Yeah, it's insane.
And it's not just that he's been like a pushy creep the whole movie. That moment is like he has grabbed her and pulled her under a tank.
Yes.
And she is like running away and pulling her skirt back up. And I'm like, how did this go from this being a character you're kind of rooting for to get laid?
Well, I will
to,
say
as
that's
you're
the
saying
thing.
it like him being like a rapier Bluto.
Right. Yes. 100%.
But in, my understanding is, and I didn't watch the extended cut. My understanding of the extended cut, there is a scene where he fucks a pie, right?
Yeah, there's also a big like glory hole scene where they're like spying on girls in the shower.
Yeah.
And then a woman comes out and yanks
and
his
then
dick.
a dog jizzes into a what is it in
eclair.
An eclair in Van Wilder.
They eat dog cum eclairs.
Right.
Yeah. There's also a scene where Treat Williams is looking for hair gel.
Oh, interesting. And he finds it,
He
right?
puts
On
cum.
the ear of
It's
a friend.
It's a fact. It is Belushi's
It's just
cum.
one of those things where America was like, there's this great sequence with the hair gel. And everyone loves it. And I'm like, so what's the sequence? Like, he jerks off and comes on his ear and it sticks there. And I'm like, doesn't do that. That's not a thing that happens.
It is so funny.
That's never happened to anyone in the history of society.
They talk about the Farrelly
Cum
brothers.
isn't glue.
The Academy Award winning Farrelly brothers.
Yeah.
Talk about.
Well, just one of them.
Did they not? Did Bobby not have any credit? That's insane.
Poor Bobby.
They talk about how when they were filming that on the day, Stiller was spiraling over the logic.
Like, this doesn't make any fucking
so
sense.
Right.
Why would it go all the way like just vertically into my ear?
And you're like, that's not how like cum holds. It looks wrong. Like, what are you talking about? And there's the moment earlier where he like comes, she knocks on the door, and he's like, hold on. And it's like he's looking for where the cum went so he could clean it up.
Right.
And in that moment, he turns 360 degrees and you see there's nothing on his ear. And they were like, Stiller was freaking out over this. And we were just like, Ben, you got to trust us. It's funny. And I feel like there's so many stories about Stiller doing something like that. And it being like he's freaking out over nothing.
Right.
He's overthinking it.
But this
and
one,
in
I'm
that
kind of
case,
with him. Yeah.
He was right. And yet,
they were
results were undeniable.
Yeah.
She put that fucking cum in her hair, and that movie made $200 million because everyone at every office was like, you gotta see what this fucking hair gel is.
I remember when my mom and dad were just laughing so much at that moment. I saw it with my mom and dad and sister, and they were just going nuts. And I was like, that's fucking gnarly. That
was the poster for the movie was her in a red dress and like a Marilyn Monroe 7-year itch pose with the hair flipped up. And every article and review I remember about that movie is like, you're not going to believe what happens in the hair gel scene. You have to see it for yourself.
By the way, another issue. Treat Williams not a virgin. There's bad.
No,
he's not a virgin at all. Rest in peace, Treat. But like he's like
he's a Chad.
He's a Chad.
He doesn't read as. I mean, I guess you could buy it as like, oh, it's all it's all show with him, and he's actually covering up for it. But it doesn't make any sense in this movie.
It's a weird game of telephone of like this thing getting like so far away from the original idea.
Have you guys seen Used Cars, the Zemeckis movie that he made shortly after this with Kurt Russell?
I've never seen Used Cars. No.
I've never seen it, but I think it is maybe playing at the Vista now.
It's worth seeing.
Yeah.
It's
highly recommend.
Far better than this movie.
It is incredibly funny, and it is the exact tone this movie is going for.
That's the thing. This movie is close to that movie in like just manic tone.
Yeah.
But Used Cars is about something really stupid, which is used car salesmen across the street from each other basically getting into like a prank war.
Correct.
And this movie is about World War II.
Yes.
And it's sort of like the tone is all wrong, and maybe there's a way to make it right for 1941 that they just didn't figure out. But with Used Cars, it's like, just simplify a little bit, and then I can, root for people and think they're stupid.
Without spoiling it, Used Cars also builds to one big set piece that is like a logistical production, like wowzer, right? And that maybe was not really expensive because the movie didn't cost that much, but certainly is like a big to-do. And it like earns pulling off this one sequence where the movie at that point has been so moderate in scale that you're like laughing at the excess of it because it's so out of nowhere. You can't believe suddenly this movie's heightening to this level versus like 1941 starting at that point.
Right.
He also, Spielberg, in this fucking documentary I'm quoting 8,000 times, says, like, he's like, I'm proud of the movie. I had fun making it. I should have let Zemeckis direct it.
Sure.
Their voice and their sensibility was like, they're on the page and I didn't get it and I didn't have a take and they were much angrier and more political and like they maybe could have pulled it off. But there's the incredible like ripple effect of like, I Want to Hold Your Hand bombs, which they make while they're sort of developing this script, comes out before this bombs, and then people are like, oh, those guys are trouble. I Want to Hold Your Hand is great,
right?
But it's like a flop, and then they write Spielberg's first flop, and they wanted to make Back to the Future next, and Spielberg was going to produce it, and they were like, if you produce our next movie, we will seem like your cronies, and no one will ever take us seriously on our own.
Wow.
So Zemeckis like puts out, I'm a director for hire. I need to just do a studio job and like impress people. Gets Romancing the Stone, over-delivers on Romancing the Stone. Romancing the Stone is a success.
Good movie.
Great movie.
And then that leads to him getting to make Back to the Future with Spielberg as producer and everyone like trusting that he's his own guy. If they had directed 1941, it probably would have been better than this.
But they wouldn't have gotten the budget.
I don't think it would have, like, we would have not had the next 10 to 15 years of Zemeckis we got, I'm guessing.
Wow.
Yeah, and I also I don't know if like a stronger directorial voice. I haven't read the script, but a stronger directorial voice or a more dialed in directorial voice to what the script is going for necessarily compensates for the problems in the script, which I think is a bit is the main issue with this movie. It's just a little overstuffed, and the narrative is hard to track. Griffin, going back to Treat Williams real quick, did you feel seen up on screen seeing a character whose defining characteristic is he hates eggs?
Does hate eggs.
Wags, to a degree you can't imagine.
Wow.
Every time the egg shit was called out, I like physically held a thumbs up to the screen, which I was not doing at any other point in the film. I'm like, I hate that I'm rooting for this guy, that I'm relating to him.
Well,
but he's right about eggs.
Zemeckis figured out the Treat Williams character with Biff. He basically, who also hates manure.
You're right.
The manure bit at the end is the same payoff as the eggs bit at the end. He ends in a pile of it.
And also Treat Williams.
And he's like similar a date rapist who you, like in Back to the Future, you enjoy his comeuppance. It feels vindicating.
And in this one, I guess Treat Williams also gets kind of like assaulted by the lady is kind of what his comeuppance is. A little bit.
But then like that's a good point of like the Wally character feels like Crispin Glover in Back to the Future with like less of a take.
Yes.
Yeah, way less of a take.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing I want to throw just like into the conception of this movie, right? And like the idea that like Zemeckis maybe would have directed this better, but should this not have been directed by anybody? Wags and Mitch, have you had this experience as well? Because I was thinking this while watching it, of like reading scripts that come across as like potential jobs or just like things that are like floating around the industry that you get your eyes on and you're like, oh my God, this is so funny. This is the funniest script I've read in a long time. And then the movie comes out 2 years later. It's a disaster, but the movie isn't really that different from the script. And you like the realization I've had sometimes of like, there are certain things that are funny on paper that just immediately fall apart if they are realized. Where you're like, this is funny in mind's eye, and the second you have real people doing it in front of like a proper set, you can't stop thinking about the fact that like, oh, World War II is happening.
Sure.
You know, like shit like that.
I know what you're describing. I can't think of a specific example.
Well, it happens to us every week with we write the Doughboys episodes.
That's true. The scripts are great.
The scripts are really, really good.
Yeah.
You have Rosenthal do a pass, and then you're like, this is the best one yet.
I know exactly what you're talking about just with auditioning and stuff. And like, for me, it's always more like, oh, this like kind of, this works. Like, this is like, it seems like the person gets this or something. And then when you see it made, you're like, ooh, something was lost in translation or whatever. But I think it's
also very often with like kind of high concept special effects comedies where I read it and I'm like, this one's actually well written. It has good jokes and good structure.
Yeah.
And then like the execution of those things is so fine for like how it stays funny but within stakes. Like the one I kept thinking of while watching this, a radically different movie, but like The Sitter, the Jonah Hill, David Gordon Green movie, was like this really hot script, and it was like, oh my God, there are like 10 incredible lines on every page of this thing. And then you watch it as a movie and you're like, it's less funny the second they're actual kids.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
You know, because you just can't stop thinking about like, is this like child abuse?
Right.
Like,
Yes. I know. I'm trying to think of a specific version of that, but like, I mean, like, I know that there's been so many instances of it. I do have a couple in my head. I'm not going to say them, but because I'm not going to say them. But
sure.
But I remember, I just remember when like Year One was coming out. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
Like
Perfect example.
How excited everyone was about that movie, and the cast was great, and then that movie just fell apart. Basically, I mean,
but that was like the hottest script.
Yeah,
that like the hottest people were attaching
old
themselves
comedy
to.
legend directing it, new comedy stars starring in it,
Right,
like
and
big
it's
concept.
like first like new project after Knocked Up.
Year One, it kind of feels like an old Mel Brooksy movie,
He's
right?
bringing
it's like,
greatness back.
Yeah, you know, caveman. That's
Everyone
funny.
was like, this script is funny on paper, but it's one of those scripts where you're like, cool, it'll take $60 million to mount.
Right.
Because it needs like giant sets and extras and whatever. And you watch it and it just like falls apart in real time.
Can I throw out a theory?
Yeah.
Is the number 1 cursed? Who got
Fuck.
Okay, let's
Movies with one in them?
1941,
I
Year
don't
One,
think we
Red
can.
One.
Red One.
Well, Red One, sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's 3 stints.
Yeah, I know,
three
but I
bad
can't like
ones.
look up movies with the number 1. Like, you know what I mean?
Sims,
Like,
he's
I
got
don't know
a
a way to
point
summon
here,
a
damn
list here.
Transformers 1.
I like that
Quite
movie.
good, but was a big flop.
Didn't do well.
Did not hit.
Yeah.
Transformers 1 is one of those movies where it's like, you know, it starts out with like, oh, I'm just like a ordinary transformer working in the mines. And I'm like, he's a fucking robot
Yeah.
that turns into shit. Like, it's such a weird thing. And,
then,
yet
yeah,
I was charmed.
That's the thing. By the last 10 minutes, you're like, is this a perfect diamond cut screenplay?
it's did you guys see Transformers 1?
I did not.
Wait, so can a
It's
1
not
be in
bad.
the title? Like 1917. See, it's 19 and 17. There's no 1.
There's no one. No, it doesn't
I
land
think-
on the 1.
Yeah,
But, like,
that doesn't count.
How about
I think
this
it's
for recent bomb?
One
Horizon
said out loud.
Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1.
I mean,
Wow.
certainly a
Good
big
movie,
flop.
Yeah.
but a big flop.
Bit of a flop.
Air Force One is the only title that's coming to mind
Oh,
as
Yeah.
well, that-
well-liked hit
right.
that has stood the test of time and has won in the
And
title.
I'm a huge fan of the airplane when a certain president is aboard. The current one, by the time this episode drops.
Ready Player
Finally.
1.
Wow.
I'm a huge fan. I think
Yeah,
that
you
Movie
movie's
like
we'll
that
great.
one.
fight over. Yeah.
I think Ready Player One is a terrific film, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
And it's one of
Loaded
Spielberg's-
Weapon one?
Mm.
I'm saying that's a flop.
I've never seen it. I wonder if it's any good.
I have
Maybe
seen
it
it. I
was.
remember it making me laugh when I was like 13.
It's just funny that it's Emilio Estevez and Samuel L. Jackson. You're like, oh, so it's like an action movie? They're like, no, it's a parody. And I'm like, but those guys could just be in an action
Yes,
movie.
right, yeah.
They could have actually
Like,
been alternate casting
yeah,
in any
what?
of the buddy cop movies of the previous 5 years.
So are they funny? And I guess I've never had the question answered for me.
Yeah.
I mean, Samuel L. Jackson can pretty much do anything.
Agreed.
Yeah.
That movie must have been Emilio getting jealous of Charlie.
Sheen. This is the thing of his
Right?
fucking brother. Yes.
Yeah, that he was like, I can fucking make fun of
you
serious
can do hot
movies
shots,
too.
I'll do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weiger's theory is bad.
It starts to fall apart.
There's a ton of good ones.
Yeah,
I just looked.
You got Godzilla -1. You got
that one was
You
good.
got Good One of my favorite movies of last
One
year.
Flew Over the
That
Cuckoo's
was-
One Flew Over the
Nest.
Cuckoo's Nest, yeah.
101
Yeah.
Dalmatians.
I'm not the biggest
Yeah.
Rogue One fan, but it is a good movie.
It's a
Sure.
pretty good
Yeah,
movie.
all right.
You fucked up
Um,
bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is
theory
terrible.
sucks.
I want to say about John Belushi, who
Uh-huh.
we've talked about, but you know,
We've never covered.
well, obviously because he's
made
make
5
a lot of
movies.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah,
He was as we've Spielberg was like obsessed with SNL. He knew, I guess, like many people, that it like had a lot of juice, and he was like kind of a groupie for the first season. He went to
was
almost every taping.
gonna say,
Wow.
did we talk about this in our group text?
What a
Okay,
dork.
yeah.
so that's like much
I think
publicized.
it is kind of dorky of him.
Yeah. Much publicized that during like those first 5 seasons, he would go to almost every taping.
He was hanging out.
And he was like entranced by the production and like the machinery and everything. What's crazier is that I have heard from people who currently work on SNL
He still hangs
that
out.
he still
Yeah.
goes to more episodes than he doesn't.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've
that's
heard that
wild.
That he'll just show up and they'll be like, yeah, he like
too. And
took
he's
his
like giving
private
Dismukes
jet.
notes.
He's standing in the back. No, he like does interact with anyone. He's just like, I love watching this happen.
I mean, good for him. If I'm Steven Spielberg, I would just do the things I wanted to do.
Totally.
Wait, was he at the infamous taping depicted in Saturday Night? Was he in attendance at that real taping?
I'm not actually sure about that. I mean, that taping was so crazy.
Yeah.
Everything was falling
I heard
apart.
that there is a moment where Sammy Fableman is in the background.
They're
playing a dual role like Belushi.
Yeah. In one shot, he's actually playing Sammy Fableman. Right.
If you look really closely, it's eagle-eyed viewers watching Reitman's Saturday Night. You can see an actor dressed like Steven Spielberg is laying one of the famous bricks, in those final seconds before George Carlin's monologue.
I finally did it. Matthew Rhys, kind of a curveball as Carlin, not
kind of
bad.
Good.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I'm gonna say this. I think I fully hate that movie.
Fair enough.
And I try to reserve throwing the H word out at films.
Sure.
But that movie drove me insane.
Yeah.
I think it basically has like 10 borderline great performances
in it. There's some bad ones too.
But I did think this watching 1941 last night, where I'm like, if they announced tomorrow that Steven Spielberg wanted to make a movie about any version of the first 5 years of SNL,
right?
Even just having seen Saturday Night, I'd be like, sign me the fuck up.
I mean,
sure.
I will say, I'm seeing here in the notes that Steven Spielberg was the guy who told Agent Brody to do the Rasta dance, introducing Sean Paul.
Yeah, he also told Ashley Simpson to do
told
the
Ashley Simpson, right? Just lip sync it, and he did give a picture of the Pope to Sinead O'Connor.
He did.
He didn't know what she was going to do with it.
Ever given notes.
Yeah, he was just like, "Hey, do you want this?"
Yeah, it's probably.
He actually gives a picture of the Pope to every musical guest. She's just the only one
Everyone
who did
else
anything.
just folds it up, puts it in their pocket.
You should rip up a picture of the two popes on Doughboys, see what happens.
You should.
You should.
Wait, have a Pope month.
Yeah.
Pope month is fun.
Conclave Pope.
Conclave.
Yeah.
Man, if the Doughboys went to the Vatican.
Yeah, Doughboys go to the Vatican and an invisible force throws them out. Like you try to cross the border and you're just like expelled.
What would Vatican month be called?
Oh man,
boy,
this is the pun master.
I don't know. Is there like a McDonald's in the Vatican? Like, is there like a
I wonder if there's a Vatican City Sparrow. There's got to be something.
Is there
Vatican?
Really?
Vatican's pretty good.
Vatican's pretty good.
Yeah,
Vatican shitty.
Wait a second.
Vatican shitty's pretty good.
Is there actually a Sbarro's at the Vatican City?
There's no way there's
I don't know.
Sbarro's. No,
there's got to be.
There's one at 33rd.
I haven't seen Conclave yet. Do they show a Sbarro or anything like that? Or
yeah,
no?
they get a big pizza in Conclave. I mean, Two Popes actually does have a pizza sequence.
Oh right,
Two Popes.
It does.
Where Hopkins says that's my pizza. That's a real sequence in the Two Popes.
I'll say I did hear a rumor about the Vatican City Sbarro's.
What's that?
That I just established may or may not exist.
Uh-huh.
I heard a rumor that someone I know went there and they looked in the marinara tank.
Oh God!
And they were doing a Jaws parody inside of it.
Oh wow!
And then they went back the next day, and in the marinara, they were doing a parody of the opening of 1941.
Uh-huh.
I hear that the Sparrow at the Vatican City is where they store all the holy water.
All of it.
I've heard that
for
too.
the entire world.
Mm-hmm. It's wet. Remember the joke is that it's wet.
Yeah.
Yes, no, he knows. He knows. We all know the joke. And you guys should listen to Griffin Sparrow episode of Doughboys. For a moment where I was making dinner, I think, while I was listening to it, and I started to have that moment with comedy podcasts sometimes where I'm like, am I having like a panic attack or a brain event? Or have they just been talking about fucking water for a half hour? Like, it feels like you've lost your mind.
It sounds like you hate us, which is the right reaction
I love it.
to
It was so funny.
Which, by the way, my reaction to anything Saturday Night Live does is like most comedians is that they can do no wrong. I love Saturday Night,
of course,
Saturday Night Live, and everything about it is great.
You text us every Saturday night.
You were like, my review,
1
A+.
It's another one for the record books, boys.
10 out of 10. The streak continues.
Yeah.
Real quick. Sorry, I heard at the Vatican.
Please.
I remember at the Vatican City Sparrow that in the pasta water where they cook the tortellinis, that the Shape of Water guy hangs out in there.
the fish guy.
Yeah, he's in
the
there.
Monster?
Yeah.
Wags, I was coming up with a Sally Hawkins take, and I think you had the better one. I was drafting it in my head.
She jerks off in the tortellini one.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to do.
Yeah, the Shape of Water guy got fully baptized in the Sparrow.
He's hardcore Catholic now. He's like a J.D. Vance, like late in life conversion.
Right. He's weird about
Yeah.
it. Right. He keeps saying ecumenical. You're like, relax.
Do you think to go on a Saturday Night Live tangent? Do you think it is like the most bulletproof of all shows still? Because I still do think that people are not as critical as I know comedians are of it. Like it.
Do you mean publicly? What are you talking about?
Gets so much shit though.
It does get shit, but
I think I think you're right, Mitch, that like I will hear people say like, oh my God, SNL is so irrelevant. Like, why is that still on the air? And I'm like, you clearly don't engage with it anymore,
Right.
but you cannot deny that this show has basically stayed culturally important for like the first like 20 years of SNL. It's like, oh, there are obviously peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
I would say they've basically remained kind of center of the culture for like 25 years uncontested.
And it's also kind of one of those like, well, why don't you go do a better one? And no one's ever like, whatever.
No one can pull it off. And also, this movie is kind of this. You want this movie to be an SNL feeling movie, and it
should be,
and it's not.
Right.
That's probably the kind of anarchic feeling Spielberg wants. And that's why, just to finish my point about John Belushi, that character was a minor character in the script, and they kind of beef it up once they cast him.
Right. That character was only supposed to enter into the film basically at the point where he lands on the ground. He was supposed to just be a last act. Here's one final element of chaos. Cast Belushi, they're like, we got to thread Belushi through the first 2/3 of this.
Belushi and Aykroyd are both doing SNL. They could only do 3 days a week of filming. And Belushi, I don't know if you guys know this, was very interested in using the drug cocaine all the time.
Does JJ have a citation for that?
And Spielberg, I think probably because Belushi died so young and so on, it has always just been like, it was wonderful working with him. It was a great time. But I think on set, he was a bit of a nightmare. And at one point, Spielberg yelled at him, like, you can't do this to me. Like, for $350,000, you got to show up on time. Because, like, Belushi was always late to set and didn't know his lines.
But, like, that's how Animal House was made, right? Where he had, like, 2 to 3 days off per week. And he would, like, shuttle back and forth and was, like, delirious.
Right.
And it comes out the year before this. And it's, like, a revolutionary
He's amazing in it.
It's, like, culturally, like, shattering, right?
Do you guys like Belushi?
I love him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's like I think all of us, he's like a little bit before our time.
Yeah.
But
Very much
But
so.
I think if you watch his, totemic like performances, it's like, oh, okay, this guy had the juice, and obviously life tragically cut short.
It was interesting to see a movie that I see Belushi doing stuff that I haven't seen before with 1940. Well, not that he did something different, but I'm saying like, oh, this is just footage of him I haven't watched because I'd never seen the movie,
Right.
And it was like, I get it. You know what I mean? I get why he was a star, and
that's the thing. Like, as I said before, every time he's on screen, it at least resembles a comedy, which you can't say for like John Candy and Dan Aykroyd.
You can't.
Like, the other wildly funny people in this movie who are all basically at the peaks of their careers. Belushi's the only one who like actually has that level of juice. To your point, there are basically, if you're like discounting small supporting roles, there are 4 Belushi like movies. Even in Animal House, he's in a lot less of it than people remember. But it's Animal House, 1941, Blues Brothers. It's 5. I'm sorry, Continental Divide, Neighbors,
and Neighbors, which I've never seen.
Those are the 5 movies where like Belushi's above the title. His face is the biggest on the poster.
Right.
I was such a big SNL kid. I discovered SNL when I was like 8 or 9, and the video store across the street from us had a bunch of VHSs of the first 5 seasons of SNL. So I was like rabidly watching first 5 seasons SNL.
Right.
And it was like canonized for me in this massive, massive way. And like my father was such a big Belushi fan. He showed me Animal House and Blues Brothers way too young. And I was sort of like raised at the altar of this guy. I remember at some point when I was young, my father saying to me, and then, Steven Spielberg made 1941, which was this big flop.
Right.
And I was like, what's that? And he was like, it's like a war comedy with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. And I was like,
how have I not seen this?
So it's the best movie ever made.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, it sucks and it's not funny.
Yeah.
And I was like, how is that possible? But I think that's like the way in which this was received in a way that also doesn't help this movie upon release is like, the idea of like, oh my God, Spielberg is going to work with the most exciting people in comedy, like the people who are fucking burning down the institutions. And these trailers that I was searching for, that fucking tagline I wanted, the first teaser trailer for this movie, which is a year before the film comes out, was by all accounts directed by John Milius, and I would say is funnier than the entirety of the finished film is John Belushi landing a plane and then doing direct address to the camera, sort of like war ad, like, I'm out there fighting for you. I need to enlist you to come see my movie next year. Like, he's pitching next Christmas, and it's just Belushi doing straight to camera chaos. And if you see that trailer and it says, like, from the director of Jaws and Close Encounters, 1 year from now, there's a John Belushi comedy. And then you sit in the theater a year later and this is what you get. Yeah, like the poster is like his giant caricaturized head.
Right.
20 minutes of him total maybe in the movie, right?
Maybe. And a lot of it is silent. Like, it's just him driving a plane.
But like, that's what they were leading with.
Yeah, well, what else are you gonna fucking lead?
Right. The second teaser trailer shows you like a model set of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And then giant
there's a big
stone
statue,
1941 numbers rise out of the ground. And then it just does like Superman flying credits of every cast member.
Yes.
Which you go into the list of like Ned Beatty, Christopher Lee,
Toshiro Mifune.
All this shit. Right, it's just giving you all the names and then says like the most explosive comedy event in the year. Those first two trailers show combined 0 seconds of footage of the movie, and all they're doing is get ready. This is going to be the biggest shit of all time. Like, they like put a fucking target on their backs.
Yeah, they did. They also meant to make it for $12 million, and it cost $31 million.
Which is so much slower than I even thought it was, honestly. But I guess with 1979, that's quite a bit, right? But
it's a lot of money.
It would be over $100 million.
It basically made its money back domestically, barely, and that's it. It made some more worldwide, so I don't think it was a total disaster. But it made Spielberg look bad because Jaws had gone over budget and over schedule. And now, Close Encounters, they kind of fucked around. Right, exactly. And like kind of made it seem like a low budget movie and turned into a really big budget movie.
Right.
And so it's by Raiders is when he's like, I need to demonstrate that I can like contain a budget. Which he does.
Because those two were like, you can get away with it if you keep making one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
Right.
And then this time it's like, if you're just breaking even, we're done with your shit.
When it came out, like I said, it basically turned a profit. Pauline Kael did like it. Pauline Kael is like one of his earliest fans.
But then turns on him by Raiders.
Turns on him for
Raiders. The next movie,
Yeah.
she's like, fuck this, it's kiddie bullshit.
Wow.
But largely critics hated it. And, it would, like you said, Griff, like they had just set themselves up for disappointment. Like, the audiences were just, I think, expecting the funniest and biggest movie. And it's like, you're not getting funny. I guess you're getting big.
Yeah. But the big isn't funny.
No, and it feels like you're being yelled at.
Very strange.
That's insane to turn on for Raiders.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pauline Kael was basically like Raiders. She was just like, boring. This is like schematic. He's like lost the plot.
And she was the one person who, when Sugarland Express came out, her review is like, this is one of the greatest debuts by a filmmaker ever. He's going to be one of the great American filmmakers.
Wow.
Like, called it dead on. And then by Raiders, she's like this fucking kid playing with his stupid toys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
John Candy is like barely in this movie,
Yes.
but he does
in this movie.
But he does have like one of the few hard jokes that worked for me, Griffin, which is when Dan Aykroyd gets knocked out, he gets hit in the head, and John Candy's like, "Oh, he always had a glass head."
Yeah,
I kind of like
funny.
that glass head. But
there you go.
There's also he also has the bit where him and what's the actor's name? McRae.
Hal McRae.
John McRae.
Who's an NFL player?
Hal McRae is a baseball player. What am I talking about? Frank McRae.
Frank McRae.
He was, that guy was an
he was
NFL
a professional
player,
football player.
Yeah.
Where he gets soot on his face and he looks like a black man, and then he throws flour. It's the flour part is like, why is he throwing flour at him anyways?
Yes.
And then they laugh at each other while Candy's panicking because they look like they're doing opposite minstrel. It's like a very weird bit that goes on for a while.
It's weird.
He's also in used cars.
I actually liked that there was like because he's like to the back of it. He tells Candy to go to the back of the tank, and I think I actually liked that there was like a guy even though it's white people who wrote this joke. I'm like, there's a man participating in these kind of racy jokes, which before it's like we're pointing and laughing at the movie is pointing and laughing at people.
That he's more active, but it's like it's one of those things where it's like I'm not even framing it as like a punching down, like punching up thing. It just so often in this movie, you're like, I don't understand who the target of the joke is, right? And like for how much Spielberg would cite the Marx Brothers and like Looney Tunes and these things that had this sort of like chaotic, a million things are happening and nothing's too big moments, all of those things have a very simple, like innate setup of like the Marx Brothers usually go into fancy places. They're at opera houses or like dinner parties, and you surround them with a bunch of, well, I never. And you're like, wait, I want to see those people be taken down.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny to see Margaret Dumont get taken down a bed. Bugs Bunny can be an asshole to a hunter because a hunter is pointing a gun in his hole and he has to like fight to survive, right? And that way it's funny when he like is a stinker. This movie is like everyone's just yelling at everyone and doing shit.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't know, like, I have no perspective on who I'm supposed to be. I don't want to say who I'm supposed to be rooting for, but just sort of like who any joke is at the expense of.
Why did John Candy throw flour at him? It doesn't even make, we don't know. It doesn't even make sense.
That whole and again, you're not sure who's supposed to be the butt of this joke. And then within that tank though, there's all sorts of shit like that happening. Like there's also Dan Aykroyd who's like Dan Aykroyd puts a sack of oranges over his head. And then he puts the 2 oranges on his eyes and is like, I'm a bug. And that's the sort of things like if that's in the script, I have no idea how they reached that point. But like it's probably just not
There's no way it's in the script.
Yeah, so it's probably just not in the script, right? So Spielberg is just pointing a camera at a funny guy and saying, like, I don't know, do something funny.
Stuff,
and so it just feels completely random.
I mean, it's very funny to think of me of like interior, you cut back to interior tank, I'm a bug, and it cuts back to whatever else.
Here's like a great encapsulation of the movie for any listeners who did not bother to watch it, right? There are like 8 major plot threads. Just within this one thread of the tank, guys, right? You have John Candy and Frank McRae doing this like race swapping play, right? Then you have Dan Aykroyd in the back. This is all in the last like 20 minutes of the movie when it's reaching a fever pitch for a movie that
on the street
starts at a fever pitch, right? So like Candy and McRae are doing this. Aykroyd is directly behind them with oranges on his eyes going, I'm a bug. And then immediately after that, the tank runs through the walls of a paint factory into giant vats of colored paint, making like huge colored explosions. And you're like, there is too much going on.
Just far too.
And none of it has to do with anything else.
Track of it.
And this is just one of the strings. And then we're like cutting back to like Tim Matheson like trying to stop.
Fucking in a plane or Ned Beatty like blowing up his own house or whatever. Yeah, like shit where you're just like.
Talk about the Ned Beatty
because
shit.
like what's going on with that?
I don't know.
It's just sort of like. I want to shout out Greg Jean, I think is his name, who did the miniatures on this movie. He's a legendary miniature guy. He'd done Close Encounters because, I mean, Spielberg says this, like, they did the most incredible job, like, making Hollywood Boulevard. Like, the details on all these buildings are amazing. Like, it's an incredibly masterful technical achievement, like, what they're doing, all in the service of the bullshit you're talking about and blowing it all up. Greg Jean, I also want to say, did Star Trek The Next Generation's miniatures. He built the ships.
Yeah.
And there's my favorite episode of Star Trek, one of my favorite episodes is Cause and Effect, which is the episode where they get stuck in a time loop because a ship keeps coming out of a black hole and crashing into them. And like then it's a Groundhog Day episode. And when that episode ends, they avoid the ship. And it turns out that it's the USS Bozeman and Kelsey Grammer is the captain, and he like calls in, he's like, hello, how are you doing? And it turns out he's from like 80 years ago. He's been stuck in a time loop for 80 years. And the USS Bozeman is NCC 1941 as homage to this film.
Wow.
There you go.
And when Kelsey Grammer falls into the time warp, does he go, oh my lord?
It's just so funny that it's Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah,
it's like Frasier era Kelsey Grammer wearing an old
Thank
Star
you for
Trek
recognizing
uniform.
what I was getting
That was very good.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Gale said,
Bob Gale,
when they were just like running wild, just throwing any single idea at the screenplay, right? And he was like, once we like were commissioned to write this movie, we just started doing a ton of research and looking into all the things that happened like in this area, in this time period, interesting weird stories from the war that we could fold into the script, and the way that like the Beatty thing is based on something that happened. They were looking for real life inspiration. And he was like, I found out about this incredible thing. I'm going to speak about this very quickly and probably get a lot of the major details wrong, but just try to do a quick overview.
Amazing. Cool.
Get ready. There's this thing called the Boeing Wonderland, which was when the Boeing company was making all the warplanes, all their factory plants where they were being constructed and housed. They were worried were going to be targets by the Japanese to be, bombed or whatever. So they built faked, hyper-detailed, force perspective miniature towns.
A pretend town named the Boeing Wonderland.
Atop the roof of this plant, so that anyone flying overhead would think it was just another suburban neighborhood. And it was basically a thing that only worked from the vantage point of someone in a plane from a reasonable distance that far above. And he was like, this is such an interesting thing. I can't believe this is real. People don't know about it because it was like kept top secret at the time. And like wrote it in as a whole plot thread and was like, we had this scene where they're like touring the town. And then we decided like it was just one thing too many in the movie. And I'm like, that sounds more interesting than 90% of the shit that ended up in the movie.
This is the whole thing. It's just like, maybe that should just be a movie.
Totally.
Like, rather than whatever this is. Before.
And then 30 years later, we get Welcome to Marwin.
Well, hey, a better movie. Is Welcome to Marvin better than 1941? Yes or no?
This is really difficult. Have you guys been welcomed to Marwin?
Yeah.
Can you weigh in on this?
I mean, Nick lives in Marwin Call, to be clear. He's one of the action figures.
This is true.
I think I'd rather rewatch 1941 than Marwin.
That's fair.
I like 1941. That's my big
Well, how much do you like it, Mitch? Like as we're winding down here.
I think it's a C.
Right. So you're saying kind of like it's over the border of enjoyable.
You give it the
It's not
lowest
like a
passing grade.
great movie, but you don't mind.
I want to watch the extended cut because by the way, what happens to what's his name? Slim Pickens.
He's just kind of dropped from the movie. I mean, that's the other interesting thing he said is that Spielberg wanted Slim Pickens in the film as a reference to Doctor Strange.
Of course.
Explicitly, right? Originally, he was going to be in one shot, non-speaking, which is like very hubristic in the same way we're talking about him like referencing his own movies and pointing at the best example of what he's trying to do through a visual reference to one of the actors. And Gale and Zemeckis very smartly were like, hey, Slim Pickens is one of the best character actors alive.
Right, you might as well use him.
You might as well use him. This entire plot line didn't exist.
And so that's why it's kind of separate from the movie.
Milius suggested, they were like, we should come up with something for Slim Pickens to do.
Yeah.
And they were like, what if there's a who's on first situation? This guy's right. You can do this whole thing. And it's like, this is the strongest comedic idea in the entire movie. It is the thing they came up with last.
He's funny.
Basically reverse engineered from having the actor, but it's also the only comedic setup in the movie where I'm like, the game is really clear to me. The stakes are really clear. The interplay is clear. The sort of like culture clash between the two of them. He plays it so well of like being terrified, but also feeling like, what is the patriotic thing to do to how to stand my ground? And then like interrogating him with prune juice because he swallowed
prune juice
the
down
evidence.
his throat is pretty funny.
It's
prune
just
juice is
funny.
Funny.
It's like funny. And it's like they landed on it by mistake at the last
How do
minute.
they not have him come in at the end?
Yeah,
though?
it's like an extended sketch that's just like a self-contained and then abandoned. It doesn't even actually impact the plot because it's like the compass, they don't get it out of him. So they figure out to use, they're like tracking the radio to figure out where Hollywood is, right?
They should have had him at the end.
Like
shit up the they should have, from a toilet perspective, you should have seen the compass coming out of his asshole, I think.
That would have been good. You mentioned, I think that's a great solve. I think we should have seen
Nickel Boys, but from a
POV shot from a toilet of a compass falling out of a man's asshole.
What if you do an upside down Nickel Boys and you shoot an entire movie from the perspective of a butthole?
And Spielberg's like, it has to be in the movie. And they're like, the film is unreleasable.
Yeah.
You have a naked asshole shitting on the camera. It's now like an X-rated film. I don't care.
If you got a brown compass falling on the camera at the end, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I'm just like, you could build the entire movie out of this. Like, there is something better about like, just like a small town guy gets like abducted by like confused Japanese soldiers and they have this weird standoff within a submarine.
That's the thing, though. There's half a dozen plot lines in here that probably would make a funny 90-minute, not as big budget movie. And maybe you can like put 2 or 3 of them together and weave it into like a silly farce. And this is just too much.
I've never, and Sims, I've never seen you this with like you're like you're just like, we just need. It sounds like you want to end this movie itself and end this episode. It's just too silly for you.
Really, you've never seen him like that?
Every time we've done the podcast,
he's describing my daily existence.
I must end this episode, but no. I kind of that's how I felt about the movie though.
Yeah.
The whole time I was just like, and
it's a real Basta, guys. Let's wrap it up.
But I also just feel like I don't usually like these kinds of movies. They're not usually good.
No.
Anytime anyone's like, oh, I want to do like my take on It's a Mad, 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 I'm like, have you watched It's a Mad, Mad, Mad? It sucks.
Yeah, also not very good. Like, is there one of those?
It has some funny stuff.
Yeah.
Like, as all these things do.
Yeah.
Rat Race has some funny stuff. Rat Race is pretty good, actually.
Rat Race, directed by Jerry Zucker.
Yeah.
Rat Race, It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World gets a lot of juice just out of being the first time someone tried that. And you can even feel it now, like living in the present and having watched all the things that have attempted to do it. It has a certain energy from like the novelty and the ambition of what they're pulling off.
Yeah.
And it also just like, it cast a wide net. They correctly got all the funny people. They let all of them do their funny things. But it is like an incredibly long, misshapen movie.
It's like 3 hours long.
Yes.
You're just like, all right, enough already.
But also,
I think it's also trying to be
separate
funny in a different way. Like this. This is confused about what funny it's supposed to be in Mad, 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 Mad World. It isn't like the thing that's going to make you like fall over laughing, but it is like it knows the type of humor it is, I guess. And this one, it just feels confused.
You also know what you're watching. It's like, they're all trying to get the money. Like it's like, okay, again, there's a big W with money underneath it, and they're all trying to get there.
The setup is incredibly simple, and it's just like, now we'll just have sketches essentially.
Right, and they're all on the road, which means they can run into other funny people. But you have the main 5 threads, and you understand them in relation to each other because they're all working towards the same end goal.
Weirdest thing about that movie is it sort of like Spielberg following up Close Encounters, even more seriously. It is Stanley Kramer's follow up to Judgment at Nuremberg.
Yes,
like that he was like, I'll do something silly after this.
Right. Starring Spencer Tracy.
Which this, should be. And instead it feels like whatever. Like it feels like an epic in search of, more jokes or a plot or a point. I don't like it.
I don't either. But I don't hate it.
No,
it is just like, it is a confounding object.
I found it like a chore.
I did as well.
Like kind of like, okay.
Not helped by the extra 30 minutes I committed to.
Yeah.
I want to watch that now. I want to watch the extended version. Is it not?
Maybe you're going to give it a B-. Maybe you're going to like that even more.
Sims, which one did you watch?
I watched the regular version. Mitch, I also feel like especially your sort of take on a lot of modern cinema is kind of like, I'm crying out for a Spielberg here. Like as much as you're 1941 is flawed, you're just recognizing like there's craft.
Yeah.
And like that's something that's just missing unless, it's Red One, obviously, which is the best crafted movie. No, I still haven't seen Red One. I'm gonna watch it.
This is reductive, but movies are things that you look at and listen to. And at the end of the day, this is directed by Steven Spielberg, the DP whose name I forget, but like had shot a ton of great movies. And
isn't it? And let me double check. William Fraker, great, legendary DP,
and it's got a John Williams score. I mean, it at least has that going for it,
which is good.
Yeah,
the John Williams score is genuinely
good.
It's got like a lot of Aaron Copland in it, and it's
exactly. It's kind of, I feel like it's on the right side of making.
It's got a really strong, hummable theme. Like the score is more in tune with the humor this movie is attempting than the movie itself.
The theory of this film's humor.
Yeah. But it's like, it is fascinating as a sort of like, we'll talk about sometimes like people like who seemingly walk straight into a cultural cancellation where it's like, oh, there's some part of them that wants to be caught.
Spurlock?
Right. Well, that's the most extreme version of it, right?
All right.
Hey, we know.
But there's also like the version of people who will sort of like self-sabotage a career because they can't handle the pressure.
Who is there someone in particular you're thinking of?
Well, you know what? This is the first credited screen appearance. He only appears at the very end, is the only moment I clocked him, of Mickey Rourke.
Yeah.
And he is someone who talks that way about his 90s.
Right. I basically behaved in a way of like, get me out of famous.
But even just what he picked, like the projects he took on and how he behaved on set was partially that like he could not handle the pressure of everyone being like, you're the new De Niro.
What's next?
You have it.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're all looking at you.
Yeah.
And I think it's not quite the same thing, but like Kinds of Kindness, I remember when you walked out, you were like, this is Yorgos being like, I need to fight back against the idea that I'm like automatic prestige guy.
Yorgos being like, I am not the next Tim Burton. Fuck you, Jesus Christ.
Right. I want to make people angry at me again so I can like reset the table and still feel transgressive.
Yeah.
I do think the way Spielberg talks about the making of this movie and the decision-making process and being like, I just like want to not hold myself to any standard is like almost consciously him trying to get his biggest flop out of the way so he can move on from it.
I like that.
Yeah, maybe there's something to that. And again, he follows it up with his, kind of his two biggest hits, right? Apart from Joe. I mean, I don't know.
And like Raiders is arguably his tightest movie.
It is.
ever.
It's his tightest movie in every way. And it's storyboarded to hell. And it came in under budget and on time and all that. And it's him being like, I learned my lesson. I'm a good little boy.
Right.
Before we play the box office game, is there anything else you guys noted in this bloated ass movie that we have not touched on?
Sims, I want to say this, that as much as I say I do like it and I appreciate it, I did pause the movie and read the entire Wikipedia for Dumbo during the movie.
Hell yeah.
And then,
much better movie.
And then read the entire Wikipedia for Trumbo because it just reminded me of Trumbo.
Yeah, sure.
So I was very distracted and took like an hour break. I thought the second half of the movie, I thought once it gets to the Zoot Suit riot is basically when I was like, that was more when I was on board. And all the big spectacle and the house sliding off the Goonies, is it the Goonies cliff?
It's cool.
I know David is always very skeptical about the notion of fan edits in the fan edit community.
I am, yes.
One of our listeners recently emailed us, and I scanned through it. I haven't sat down and watched it, but we have our infamous battle about which half of the holiday is good and which half is bad.
Yes.
And a listener emailed him was like, I agree with your take. So here is my cut of the holiday that is just the Kate Winslet half of the movie. Where Jude Law and Cameron Diaz never appear on screen.
Sure.
That cut itself is an hour and 10 minutes, which speaks to how bloated that film is.
Yes.
But even at the end where the two like cross over, he cut around any time.
Oh, so you don't even see them.
You never see them.
Okay.
But this sent me down a rabbit hole of similar fan edits. And there's one guy I found on Reddit. I've been meaning to pass this along to you, Mitch, who is advertising that he did a cut of Romulus where he took out all the dumb fan service callback shit.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Took out all the lines, and people were like, this is a lot
I would watch
better.
that just
So
because.
then I messaged this guy to get a link to it, and he was like, I have a couple other edits you might be interested in. And one was a similar cut of Solo where he did a similar, like, take out the dumb fan edit shit.
Wow.
Or the dumb fan service shit.
Right.
And, like, streamline the story.
Which, there's not too much of, right.
And he did a cut of Miami Vice that he called Miami Nice.
Okay.
Where he was like, can you combine the superior aspects of the director's and theatrical?
Right.
And I'm like, this guy seems really interesting. I like all of his thought experiments. What I want someone, maybe this guy, to do next is do a cut of 1941 where you just put in the entirety of Dumbo. It's a clean, it's a pretty light lift.
Yeah.
I'm just watching like the mom elephant caress Dumbo while she sings Baby Mine, and I'm just like, animation is so beautiful. And then I'm thinking about like in 1941, this must have felt like really revolutionary to watch something like this.
Yeah.
Well,
then we're not watching Dumbo anymore, and I'm like, boring. Like back to this shitty movie.
So you can certainly go full frame with some of the Dumbo. You've got some wides of the screen with the theater watching it. You've also got some reaction shots of Robert Stack. I wonder if you have enough to sustain the full movie just between like kind of, cutting through existing footage. I think you probably
funny
could.
if we just
occasionally
cut back
check
to Robert Stack like 80 times, just being like, still good.
Yeah.
I was reminded. My thing is, I was reminded of how good Robert Stack is in Beavis and Butthead Do America. So funny.
He's
good
so
in the movie too. I like
also,
him.
like,
He's good in this. He's like the funniest part.
Like
he's so
2
funny
years
in Airplane.
later.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
So good in Airplane.
immediately after this, figure out how to use him in comedies properly. He's pretty good in this.
He's good in this, but he actually just sort of seems like a serious person who's trying to clean up the mess. And you're like, I support you, Robert Stack. But Airplane gets the straight arrow joke with him much better.
I want to call out the fan edit Redditor is username Straight Cuts No Chaser. And if they tell me that they don't want me saying their username on mic, then I will have this cut out of the episode.
I'm sure they would be happy.
I have one. I have one last, just 2 last thoughts. Basically, one, I like that it was. I like that it was lighthearted because there's like sirens going off and it's about the destruction of Hollywood, which is like, if it was a dramatic movie watching that this week, it probably would feel like too much.
The timing is
the
hard.
other Spielberg movie we watched this week is Always, which is entirely about like forest fires.
Oh, dear
and
Lord.
guys trying to like
airplane,
extinguish in planes flaming trees. It's just a weird to Spielberg to watch in a very tragic week for the Los Angeles area.
So I was happy that it was lighthearted. The end there, I want to ask you guys this. He's like, 42 is going to be an even bigger year. Were they angling for, was that a sequel angle?
Feels like it.
Jesus Christ.
It feels like it.
That would be, and they could watch Bambi.
That's
fun.
That was,
yeah.
That's just the movie is just like the guys who didn't go overseas are just like, should we watch a movie?
What
and they go watch Bambi.
Amazing franchise setup to just be like, yeah, we can make one for every year.
Yeah, Jesus, we got these years on lock.
Yeah.
All right,
we're like 38 years ahead right now.
Go ahead.
I have two more quick things. One is, and y'all may have the factual answer there, but like, so in this one is fictionalized where the land of Hollywood land is busted off by John Belushi's plane, right?
Right.
That's not how
the
it
famous Hollywood side
Yeah.
used to say Hollywood land.
Well, my understanding is, because what I learned is that the land was destroyed by the Rocketeer.
Oh.
So do you know which is true?
Oh, boy. That
You're
Rocketeer.
a Rocketeerist.
I'm a
Yeah,
Rocketeerist, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it was definitely Billy Campbell. Is that the Rocketeer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like in the movie Hollywood Land,
The Ben Affleck movie.
Adrian Brody.
And Adrian Brody, right. Yeah.
Where they use the crumbling of the land as like a metaphorical
darkness.
Right. The darkness is so great.
Yeah.
This place isn't even a land anymore. It's just an idea. But I feel like they explain in that what actually happened to the letters. What did happen?
I think Adrian
Brody
Brody in that movie, as Laszlo Toth takes it down as an architectural experiment.
Yeah, he does.
He pours water on it. He runs his hang along.
There's a Brody verse that is slowly building up where his village character, unfortunately, is going to pop into the net.
And there's only one man who can stop it.
I have a buddy who
Private Royce from Predators.
Sure. Or what about the mean record executive from Cadillac Records? I'm just trying to
Arthur
think,
Chess?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's Arthur. It's definitely Chess.
It's
Leonard
Chess Records.
I have a buddy who confronted the Rocketeer outside of a hotel, and he said that he didn't believe that he was the reason that the land went down, and he punched him. The Rocketeer punched him.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm kind of with the Rocketeer there, honestly. Like,
yeah. I mean, like, even if it was a thing that he like was made up, like, it's still
don't confront. Leave the man alone. He's an old man.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you read that op-ed where the Rocketeer said he was voting for Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really disappointing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I should have seen it coming from like an Art Deco 30s like hero who's like kind of Ayn Rand coded.
Yeah, and it's also just like, I don't know, he's an old man, and like, what's he done recently outside of Dancing with the Stars? And punching the guy.
I have one more. I have one more.
What's the other?
I heard that he almost did a movie a few years ago that he was going to do. Red Rocket was actually going to be Red Rocketeer.
Oh yeah, I did read that.
He just didn't want to show dick on screen.
Yeah.
Sean Baker insisted.
Yeah.
Wait, what was your other thought?
What's your other thought?
My other thing, going back to Trumbo, fun fact, the Wikipedia.
Of course, let's please go back to Trumbo.
Gotta go back to
the
Trumbo.
Wikipedia entry for Trumbo was written in a bathtub. All right.
Yeah, of course. There you go. Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. The page itself is wet.
Yeah.
By the way, Los Angeles has an idea to help battle the fires in the future.
Uh-huh.
They're going to build a bunch of Sparrows. Jesus Christ.
That's good. You know, I actually heard. I went to Sparrow last week because I was just like, we're dealing with fires out here, and it's like you kind of like, I just want some trashy food to kind of comfort me, and it's great. All these fast food workers are still on the job. God bless them. So I went to the Sparrow at the Fox Hills Mall to get myself some comfort food. And they're boiling the marinara back there. In the marinara is Trumbo with a typewriter in the screenplay.
But he's got a mustache and a chef's hat on.
Yeah,
he's like, hey, I'm writing my screenplay. I'm Italian Trumbo over here.
Also, I know we moved on from our Adrian Brody little sidebar. I don't want to offer spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen The Brutalist yet.
Yeah.
You know what my favorite scene was in that movie?
What?
When they go to Italy and the old guy pours the marinara on the marble.
That is really
kind of
beautiful.
reveals its beauty.
That was very touching and very sensitive culturally, I found.
From Sbarro's, of
Yeah,
course.
well,
You see them go to Sbarro's, ask for a cup of marinara. Yeah.
I went to one of those hydrants that wasn't working, and I followed it back. Guess where it ended up?
Is it Sbarro?
Sbarro.
Oh boy, that's an issue.
That was
I'm
I think,
really-
part of the issue.
I'm really glad he gave us the time to answer, Mitch, rather than just telling us.
My only last thought is that, and this sums up this movie to me.
Yeah.
Please.
This sums up this movie to me is that when they do the credit, I mean, I know we've talked about the credits a lot.
Yeah.
But when they do the credits, and maybe you said this already, the explosions we
Before
mentioned.
the explosions, yeah.
But every character they show is just like, they're all screaming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just
But it's like
fucking
Dan Aykroyd. That's
screaming.
just
clips of everyone
many
screaming.
Because there's no clip of anyone being quiet in this movie
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
could find.
And can I actually just say one more
Of
thing before we
course,
play the box
please.
office game?
Yeah, I think you need to.
I forgot to bring this up earlier, but Wiger, when you were saying that this movie has the manic energy of the Waterworld stunt show,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which can sustain for 20 minutes but not like a full 2 hours, did you hear the rumor that Universal is going to replace that with a Sbarro World stunt
Again, for any listener who doesn't know what's
good.
going on, please listen to Doughboys every week, a wonderful podcast, but especially Griffin Sbarro's episode.
The Super Nintendo adaptation of Sparrow World actually has an amazing soundtrack. It's a weird.
Yeah, it does.
I heard
It does. Yeah. So this film came out. This actually is weird. This film came out at Christmas time. I don't think this is a particularly good Christmas
No, but as
movie.
I said, that teaser trailer
No,
is
they're
Belushi
going for, yeah,
Their
yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
I'm sure
trees.
this
Ned Beatty
Christmas
is nailing the
telling
wreath
you-
at the end when he knocks
That's
his
true.
house into the
There's
It's kind of like a very light Christmas movie.
I also think that like before Spielberg, basically created the modern blockbuster with Jaws in a summer release, Christmas was the #1 most desirable release.
Christmas is much more wide open. You're right.
It was the best launching
all
day.
of these movies are big. So
Yeah.
it's opening number 3.
Okay.
Which is pretty like decent, but as it wasn't like the success they hoped for.
Mhm.
And number 1 at the box office is kind of the biggest play of the year. Sort of. It's a big sci-fi movie.
It's a big
We've
sci-fi
covered
movie
it on our Patreon.
in 1979. We've covered it
Yes.
on our Patreon. Is it 2010?
No.
The year we made contact?
No.
Is it Star Trek the Motion
That's
Picture?
what it is.
Okay,
That's
there
what
we
it
go.
is. Star Trek the Motion Picture,
Mhm.
which of course was a television show. They were going to make Star Trek Phase 2.
Yeah.
And then Star Wars came out and they were like, fuck, this needs to just be a movie. These are movies now.
Yeah.
And Star Trek the Motion Picture arrived and did well, but was also disappointed.
But it's
disappointing. at
It's
the box
also
office.
like almost like if they announced tomorrow that they were greenlighting a $200 million NYPD Blue movie with the original
Like,
cast.
literally, yes. I mean, maybe, okay.
It's not. I'm trying to
It's
think of what
kind
a
of
better analog.
The
is.
X-Files is kind of a good analog, I guess.
but only
But they've
if-
already done
that's the
movies
thing.
of that. Like
it would be
it's-
the X-Files if X-Files didn't have 2
It's-
movies and a revival.
Yeah, like, or, yeah, I don't know. I mean, some kind of big cult show.
Yeah, it just
But
speaks
not
to
the biggest show.
how
Right.
massive the Star Wars Close Encounters effect was, combined with like Trek being the original cult show that lingered.
Real quick, Sim. I know you've covered it on the Patreon. People have heard your take, but Sims, as a Trekkie, what do you think of Star Trek Motion Picture?
I am a huge fan and huge defender of, as it was known at the time, Star Trek: The Slow Motion Picture.
Mhm.
I think it just
Or the
rocks.
motionless picture,
or
I've
the
heard as
motionless
well.
picture. I saw it when I was a kid, and I was just very taken with it. It is objectively boring, and it is objectively kind of like not very good at like the Star Trek stuff. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't really have a really good handle on Kirk and Spock
I
and
think it's
stuff.
a great mood piece.
But
though.
it's such a cool, weird, moody movie, and all the visual effects are so cool, and I love the story, and I always will defend it. But Khan is, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, is them figuring everything out. Like the formula for these movies, Kirk and Spock's dynamic, everything. I mean, I love that movie.
I want to shout out real quick while we're talking Star Trek. Nicholas Meyer, who is the director of Star Trek
Yes.
VI: The Undiscovered
Of Wrath of
Country,
And of Wrath of
Khan.
Khan.
Yeah, it's but Nicholas Meyer, when I was on during the WGA strikes, he was out on the picket lines like every day. I'd see that guy all the time, and he's like he's I believe he was born in the 40s, so like he's still out there.
He's like in his late 70s.
Yeah.
He rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, I
God
love
bless
him.
him.
Reminds
Two
me of me,
things.
kind of.
David, do you have the Star Trek the Motion Picture soundtrack on vinyl?
No, I have Wrath of Khan on vinyl. but
Okay,
not
I bought it and then a
motion
better
picture.
version came out. I'll
You
give you
can-
the
you
old
can-
version,
by
the
all
less
means.
good version.
Fair enough.
Second thing, this episode's coming out on February 2nd.
Okay.
Yesterday, February 1st, on our Patreon, we finished the Jelly Trilogy commentary.
And we're about to
So
start
it's now
the
known.
next generation.
We're about to start doing all the Picard movies.
Wow.
Very excited for that.
Yeah.
Great
layout.
all 4 of them. There's only 4. But
Sure.
then we have a little treat for movie 5.
We can say it.
Yeah, Galaxy Quest.
We're tackling Galaxy Quest on.
Why
for that.
not?
Why not?
Why not? Now, but listen to this. Box office game, guys.
Sorry.
Okay.
1941 is opening number 3. No, I'm just saying, I didn't know this until now.
Uh-huh.
This is devastating for 1941. Number 2 at the box office, new this week, opening against 1941, is one of the best comedies of the 70s.
Wow.
And like a shot out of a cannon, holy shit, like movie star moment.
Is it The Jerk?
It's Steve Martin in The Jerk.
wow.
Yeah, that is devastating.
So like that movie is what, 85 minutes long or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and like so fucking
A guy
funny.
who had never been in movies before, probably cost what, $5 million?
Yeah, exactly. Cost no money.
Yeah.
And just like it cost $4 million and made 100.
Right. And it's just like 2 generations of comedic geniuses, Carl Reiner and like Steve Martin, just building a perfect comedy out of nothing.
Right. So like that's tough for 1941.
Yeah,
Where it's
yeah.
like I can just go see The Jerk. Like that's much better.
Yeah.
Number 4 at the
And
box
Jerk
office.
handily outgrossed it.
Yeah,
in the end,
by far.
Yeah.
Number 4 is also a kind of 1941-esque movie, but it's a very serious war masterpiece. But it's also an out of control.
Is it Apocalypse Now?
Apocalypse Now.
Wow.
So you could also just go see the real thing.
Oh my
you
God.
know what I mean?
That's insane.
Yeah.
Just fucking go see Apocalypse Now if you want to see a bloated, amazing war epic.
Yeah.
Can I
Number 5.
Can I quickly interject here? Isn't it weird that Billy Corgan doesn't sing about 1941 and 1979?
That's a great,
Like the movie?
It is weird.
He should be like,
great note,
What?
Mitch. Yeah, cool. Because
hot take, that movie is good. Something like that.
I give it a C. Corgan's hard to do. That's a little Corgan, right?
1979.
Just keep doing that, right?
I mean, Wiger and I will do it occasionally.
That's good, Mitch.
yeah, that was good.
That was a good Corgan.
Chords.
But he should have sang about 1941.
It's his favorite year, but he should have sang about another year.
Yeah. Let's go see 1941. Like that should have been in the song.
Yeah, that should have been.
see 1941. It sounded like Cartman. Get some cheesy poofs.
Yeah, you know what? He should have sang it like Cartman too, honestly.
He should. Why didn't he sing it like Cartman? Like,
Can I try a big take?
like, what if Rick Rubin started doing that when he's like brought in as like, you know, a big budget producer for a new record? He's like, you should sing it like Cartman.
Yeah.
That's my one note.
More Butters, less Timmy. I feel like South Park has strayed away from its real core, which is cheesy poofs. I feel like they barely
they're
mention
not
cheesy
cheesy
poofs
I have
anymore.
not seen South Park in like 15
Oh,
years.
it's still-
Do they
Well,
not-
I'll tell
does
you
it
what
not
you
come
haven't
up?
missed. Cheesy poofs content.
Oh shit. Number 5, I just want to. So you know we've got Star Trek: The Jerk, 1941, Apocalypse Now. Number 5 is
Big
is a hit movie.
Okay.
But it's also a number movie. Much like now. So 1941's even getting outboxed in the number title realm.
Is it a year as well?
No, it's just a number.
It's just a number. Is
It's
it 10?
It's
Blake Edwards 10?
Blake Edwards is 10 with
Griff,
Dudley
good
Moore and Bo Derek.
Another, dare I say it, and I know this term has been retired, but I think it applies too directly for this film.
Big, fat,
It is a big tittied hit.
big titty.
10 is a big tittied hit
I've
and
never-
is another low blow
no
to
more.
open against 2 comedies that are really sticking with the culture.
I've never seen 10.
I haven't either. I just know it's got big boobs in it.
You guys seen 10?
I saw it many years ago. I remember it being like kind
Mitch
of
is like, now wait a second, it's 1 and then 0? That's what I put into Google?
it just turned into Zemeckis here.
You've seen it,
I
Nick?
saw it
You-
many
like,
years
it's,
ago. I remember. I think I remember just like because I knew I liked Dudley Moore, and so
of
but
course,
I
well.
don't. I think I might have been too young for like the comedy, but like the right age for the raunch. If memory serves.
Right,
Yeah.
right, of course. That
Always
makes
the right
sense.
age
It's
for the
also just-
launch.
It's funny that the setup for that movie is Dudley Moore, who is 2 foot -6 inches,
Right.
is married to Julie Andrews.
Statuesque woman.
They go on vacation. And he sees a younger woman who is so fucking hot that the movie is basically like, cheat on your wife.
Right.
And Blake Edwards was married to Julie Andrews.
Oh, man.
Also at the box office, we've got And Justice for All, the Pacino movie,
Oh, sure,
which
you're out of
is
order.
silly.
Yeah.
But, you know, not bad.
No, but still.
You've got the film Starting Over, which is the Burt Reynolds sort of romantic dramedy with Jill Clayburgh.
That's a good movie.
Pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Kind of one of his more serious, actually pretty good movies. Mm-hmm. You've got The Rose with Bette Midler, which was her kind of breakout Mark Rydell film.
Playing not Janis Joplin.
You're playing a Janis Joplin-esque diva. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You've got the Black Stallion with Mickey Rooney that got him the late in life Oscar nom.
Mm-hmm.
Never seen.
Me neither, actually. Yeah. I saw Carol Ballard did the remake, right?
It's Carol Ballard.
Yeah, I saw that one.
That's this one. That's this one.
Oh, wait, then who did the...
I don't fucking
There's
know.
the 90s Black Stallion.
Yes, there is.
Yes. Carol Ballard did the original.
Is it just about a horse? Like, what does it do?
Can I look? I know I flopped with my our one movies cursed earlier. Like I know that didn't take. How about this? Flop. Are horse movies cursed?
Interesting.
You mean like it has to be like because there's lots of movies with horses in them.
Yeah, no, but like a movie centered on a horse.
Right.
Spirit
horse in the title.
Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron.
Yeah.
We don't like War Horse. You and I both put that pretty low in our Spirit.
I'm not a big fan of War Horse.
What's the best movie with the horse in the
Dreamer?
Title? Never saw Dreamer.
But that's my favorite line in the movie Hamlet 2.
Oh, sure.
When he's introducing Kim what's her name? What's her fucking name?
Oh.
Elizabeth Shue.
Yes.
And he's like trying to get the kids excited about Elizabeth Shue, and they're like, they don't know who she is. And he's like, Dreamer with the fucking horse. It always makes me laugh.
Spirit, I haven't seen Spirit Running Free or whatever the recent one was called. The original Spirit is very well animated and a bit of a snooze.
I've been thinking about showing Spirit to my daughter because it seems kind of chill.
I was going to say, it's a perfect, like, that age movie. But no, I think, Wiger, you might have redeemed yourself with this take.
Hidalgo? Yeah. Do we like Hidalgo?
No one likes Hidalgo.
I said Seabiscuit right off the bat. You need to respond to a Seabiscuit.
Oh, Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit's like as good as you can get. That's like the ceiling for a horse movie. And that movie's mostly not about the horse.
Yeah, but does anyone give a shit about what was the other the Malkovich one called?
They made a Secretariat movie.
Secretariat.
Oh yeah, that one's even worse. Seabiscuit's not bad.
Seabiscuit's all right.
Number 10 at the box office is.
This is a pretty good take, Wags.
It looks like it's a re-release of a George P. Cosmatos movie called Sin or Restless, starring Raquel Welch. This is not important.
Weird.
Anyway, that's the box office game for 1941. I just think it illustrates how badly its lunch is getting eaten by better movies. And like next week, Kramer versus Kramer comes out.
Wow.
Which is like one of the biggest movies of that year.
Isn't it number one?
It certainly is up there, and it wins the Oscar and all that. So it's sort of like...
I've never seen Kramer versus Kramer. I think it's coming to the Vista. Never seen it. I know. Blind spot.
It's good. It's dated, but it's like a very watchable movie.
I think the sequel's better.
Go ahead.
Kramer versus Matlock versus Infinity.
The fuck is that?
Someone's behind on Doughboys.
Oh, am I? I am because I got addicted to
I transmuted the joke a bit. You've been addicted to Bandsplain.
Yeah, I'm listening to her Britpop series.
I turned it to verses, of course, in Mitch's original joke. The purity of it is that they meet. They don't fight. They meet.
I appreciate you, Griff, even making a joke off of that joke, which I think no one liked when I said.
It's a good joke. It's a good joke. I like it the more it has to be explained.
How about Kramer versus Kramer versus Kramer, and then a Seinfeld movie underneath it? How's that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think we just all
Kramer
agree that's
versus
fun.
Kramer.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, you could do Kramer versus Kramer versus Kramer versus the Laugh Factory audience.
So what are Hoffman and Streep doing in that movie? Why?
They're there.
They're like there. On the stand.
Okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And she's like crying about the wall with the clouds in the boys' bedroom.
Right.
And
then we just cut to Richard's.
No, they're on stage. All of them are on stage at the Laugh Factory. But she's like on the witness stand. And then Michael Richards.
So it's just like the movie is just happening.
Saying slurs. And Dustin Hoffman's like, aren't you supposed to be defending
You know
me?
what's still crazy?
What?
Michael Richards doing that shit.
Can I say?
It's so crazy.
I, at least once a year, watch the Seinfeld on Letterman.
Oh, we were just talking about
that.
He's
It's
a
a
good
real
guy.
bit of TV.
Stop laughing. It's not
Stop
funny.
laughing. We were just talking about this the other day. Probably with the similar people you were talking to about it, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. I watch it so much. It's so fascinating because it is like the last moment culturally where the news travels slowly enough that the studio audience hasn't heard it.
Yes.
Right. They haven't actually heard it. They might have heard about it.
Well, no.
Okay.
That's the thing. They start laughing because they think it's a comedic setup.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, today, if that happened, it would hit the internet so fast that the night before, anyone going in to see Letterman would have heard this already. And this like taping happening 12 hours after the event was a little too fast for people to have context.
I was saying it's the last new laughs at Kramer. Kramer never gets up more. The new fresh laughs never happen with Kramer ever again after that moment.
That is wow. I think that's right.
It's the truth.
All right.
It's the truth.
I think it's right.
It was worth it.
We are done.
We're done?
We're done with 1941.
Guys, thank you so much.
You guys did a great job.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course.
It's great. I'm so glad you're doing the first half of Spielberg's filmography, and it's a really always such a treat to come on the podcast.
I think we'll do it. We'll do an in-person episode this year.
I think so too.
If you guys are in New York, at some point this year, it'd be great to finally cut it up IRL.
It almost happened.
It's going to happen.
It almost happened.
It's going to happen.
So hopefully
what I'm saying.
You guys got some live shows scheduled in the area, and we have our designs on it. And hopefully by the time, we know far enough out on the schedule what we can
we'll
sort of for you guys. It'll be in person to commemorate you guys joining the Five Timers Club.
Oh, that's fun.
Do we get jackets? Is it like SNL? Do we get jackets or anything, or no?
Fuck yeah. I guess we'll get some jackets.
Yeah, fuck you. Get the fuck jackets.
We're going to do a pizza tour in Connecticut. We're very excited. Also, we have a big text, the blank dough, where we get to get your movie takes. We bother you and ask you for your movie takes every day on the daily.
Yeah.
Well, and vice versa, and especially the takes we don't want to say on mic. I will say I did a show with Tammy Sager, frequent guest on your show, great person, upcoming guest on our show if everything works out.
Absolutely.
But I did a show with her, and she came up to me backstage and said, "What are the 3 most recent texts in blank dough?"
Wow,
that was the first thing she said. I want to see what the last 3 texts were.
And was it you guys explaining the end of The Brutalist to me? Because it was pretty helpful. Honestly, it made me like the ending more.
That was peak performance from the blank dough thread when we were all talking about The Brutalist. That was pretty.
It was the thread
haymakers in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was us at its peak. Yeah.
Can I shout out?
And someday we'll create the mutual $1 million Patreon tier where you get to read that text.
Yep.
We will only ever make it public if it's $1 million per person.
You get to join the thread. You can't participate.
Right.
You can
read
watch.
only.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I shout out Griffin real quick? Griffin, I don't know if you have a Steelbook related nickname yet. I would pitch the Man of Steel. But you could also be a Green Book riff for the Steel Book. I don't know. I'll just whatever you want to run with there. But
I like Man of Steel books. Yeah,
the Man of Steel books. Griffin
you like
Newman,
that over the Steel Book?
The Steelbook, unclear what it's referencing, and what it's referencing is a bad movie. The Man of Steel book connected me with like the site you sent me to did not feel like an actual retailer, but the Ninja Scroll Blu-ray, which the Steelbook, which was in very limited release, and my pre-order got canceled. I was like, Griffin, I'm in a jam here. You got to help me out here.
Right. You had pre-ordered from Crunchyroll, and then they ran out, and I went to my Blu-ray message boards and was like, this seems to be a recurring problem.
Right.
I'm going to dig into who people say, because at this point, everyone else had sold out of it.
And the URL you sent me was
I sent you to Bull Moose.
Yeah, whatever it was like one of those weird like Estonian sites that like illegally streams NBA games, that you find. That's just like, it was such a weird like website that actually delivered and actually had I ended up getting my Steelbook, so I really appreciate it.
You got your Steelbook?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, this is why
the way you told me.
This is why Natalie's had a go bag long before the fire started.
The way you confirmed that the Steelbook had arrived, successfully been delivered, was you took a picture of your hand holding it and just wrote in all caps, "Griffin Newman has a 10-inch cock." And I said, that is the coolest way anyone has ever been given credit for knowing which e-tailers to get Steelbooks from.
I stand by that.
Exactly. A deeply dorky thing. No, but I was happy to do that mitzvah, and you guys are the best. It's always a treat.
Griffin is hung like Seabiscuit.
All right.
Jesus.
Let's start
seeing
this.
here, Seabiscuit had a famously small penis for a horse.
God damn it.
He could run real fast.
I called him C Peanut in the locker rooms. Anything you guys want to plug outside of Doughboys at large?
1941. You should check.
Yeah,
it
check out
out.
1941.
1941.
Yeah, Doughboys
Check
podcast
it
about
out.
chain restaurants. Me and Mike Mitchell, Sims and Griffin have both been on. If you haven't listened, good jumping on points available in recent memory.
Yeah.
And people should watch Mitch's show on
Thank you, Wags.
Peacock,
It's always
Twisted
good.
Metal.
Yeah.
Mitch's plays Stu in Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal is really funny and it's got a lot of good action. It succeeds in as an action comedy in a way that 1941 doesn't. So
I would strongly agree with that. And season 2 is coming out sometime this year.
Season 2 is coming out sometime this year. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
It needed more.
Also,
go ahead, sorry, Griff.
no. What were you gonna say?
It needed. We talked about this a little bit, but 1941 needed more candy.
Yeah, it needed more candy.
It needed more candy. Yeah.
Need more candy. No, I was just gonna say, not to force your guys' hand. You were calling out that you've had Sims and I on the show a couple times. The person you got to get on Doughboys is Mr. Ben Hosley.
wow.
Oh, that is
Wow.
I think there is a real kind of heater of an episode untapped.
I mean, it would be
The
a
next time
huge-
Ben's in Los Angeles.
It would be a huge honor.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Let's make it happen.
He's got opinions.
Ben, you were great on. I loved your PTR episode. So yeah, definitely. When next time you're in LA, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Come on.
All right.
I mean, it's not going to be fun for you, Ben, but come on, come do it.
All right. I get supper through.
Thank you guys for doing this. Thank you all for listening. Tune in next week for Let Me See, another stinker from Steven Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Wow.
It is just, I say it at the beginning of that episode, it's one of the greatest comeback movies of all time, if not the undisputed greatest.
We recorded that episode with the great
Brian Michael Bendis.
Brian Michael Bendis.
Wow.
Yeah, legendary comics writer.
Yep.
Yeah. An Indiana Jones superfan. So tune in for that. As we
Yes.
said, Next Generation Picard Trek movies coming up on Patreon.
That's right. We'll start off
Sign up
with
for that.
Generations.
But also February 11th, doing Spielberg TV movies.
yeah, something evil.
And Wicked.
yeah,
Isn't that what? Savage.
Savage, not
Yeah.
Wicked. Anyway,
I had Wicked on the brain.
it's kind of just a damp ending. But yep, that's true.
And as always, that ending was so damp. I briefly mistook it for a Subaru.
Should I put pepperoni on it?
Sims, when's you're out?
Oh, whatever.
Great question.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to be done in 2 hours, but we'll see. I mean, this movie is less.
Casey just laughed at that.
God damn, come on. This movie is not weighty enough,
Right.
I think
There's plenty to discuss, obviously, but
tremendous
it's not like but wait a second, like where it's like fucking Jaws, and you're like, did we do
it
forget
justice?
one of the 10 most famous movie sequences of all time, or whatever? Like it's.
Yeah, the Jaws episode, we forgot to talk about like half of his teeth. We only covered the top half.
What's the quote?
Fuck, I'm trying to find it.
Yes, it
yes,
does.
it does.
Oh, we're going to
Very
talk
much
about
so.
that, Emma.
A subtle tip of the cap.
Yeah, very subtle. Oh,
More horny, though.
mhm.
I like that. I like that aspect.
Is it a little hornier?
This is gold, Griffin. We're missing this great gold.
Hold on.
That's true. We're recording it.